Guys, intro time.
Wait, which intro?
The wisdom check.
Oh, good.
Wait, no. I thought we were keeping the old intro. What's wrong with the old one? People like that one.
It was too long.
Yeah.
Too many fucking gifs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but can we keep the part where I yell, more?
No.
But it's the intro to end all intros.
I got like, what, 2 lines last time?
Do you want more lines, Tim?
Well, no, not really.
In a world without answers.
Yeah.
Wait, do you want to start with that?
Here we go, exactly like last time.
Wait, okay, so we're doing it the exact same way? Let's start with Smoky Bar.
No, it's a new season. We have to have a new intro.
More.
Not sure why we thought this would go any differently.
Oh, well. Welcome, everyone, to the Wisdom Check, where Jeff and Dustin welcome a guest every week to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Welcome.
This is ridiculous. I'm starting the stream now.
Wait, where's my die at? Well, we can't start until I botch, and it's not an intro unless I'm botching.
You're on.
All right, we should be on.
All right, everybody, welcome. Another Monday night. It's the Wisdom Check. I am Dustin. Over on the other side of the screen there with me is Jeff. Jeff, say hello to the crowd.
Hello, crowd. How are you? Welcome.
And this week in the hot seat, we have a friend in here. We have Frenden. Frenden, say hello to everybody.
Hello, I am Frenden.
He is Frenden. If you need a friend, you've got a Frenden.
It's right in the surname. It's right in the surname.
You know, I really wonder if that is just a username or if that was your actual name, and now we know.
it is my actual name. The nice thing about it is it's an Ellis Island bastardization, which means that there are like 10 of us in the U.S. So I got the domain, I get the email addresses, I get the social media. It's fantastic. There are none of us.
You don't have to fight.
Oh,
There's no
great.
dog fighting for any of that stuff, right? So you're in good shape.
Oh, boy.
Man.
Well, let's get right into it then. So, when you're not getting a surname of Frenden, you're occasionally playing some role-playing games. How
That's
did you
the
get
rumor.
your start?
So, pretty late actually. I lived rurally for most of my 20s, like early 20s to just about 30 years old, and I was starting to accumulate tabletop books, but I didn't have anybody to play with because there were like no neighbors to speak of. And I moved to Austin when I turned 30, and then I slowly started getting into games, but all I could find was like 5e and Pathfinder pretty much there. And then I started to meet like you folks online, like you, Chuck with Defenders of Kobold, Grouch Couch, kind of that same crew that kind of is congealed. Like, and I started to play with Chuck, and I finally got to play DCC, which is that if I have an RPG spirit animal, it's DCC. I love DCC to death.
Now, what makes DCC resonate with you?
So, 2 things, and one of them is something that I don't think a lot of people think of with DCC, but it's actually that the warrior is kind of a mini powered by the apocalypse build because of the mighty deed die. It's all the gonzo crunch that you want, but if you're playing a warrior, you can affect the battlefield just as much as a wizard with like epic spells and stuff. And
I love that mechanic. It is one of my favorite mechanics in DCC.
Me too. Yeah, 1000%. Yeah.
Well, next time I play, I'll have to avoid being the gong farmer and go straight for warrior.
That's right. Yeah. First, you got to survive the funnel.
Well, we did the Black Heart of Thacula the Undying for the competition between DOK, us, Grouch Couch, and I ran it, and so they had to pick the pre-made characters, and so he picked the thief. He didn't get to have fun with the Mighty D die. But.
So actually, that was the first thing I watched of y'all's. That was
Really?
actually how I found you guys.
Wow.
I hope I didn't suck.
No, it was great. I loved that. My first entry into finding out that DCC was being streamed on Twitch, because I thought for the longest time that like all tabletop was being done under the D&D category. I didn't know there was a tabletop category. And so when I was searching for DCC, I found DOK first because of the Crawl to Death. And I was like, ooh, I need to check out these other teams that are in this. And I found you guys. I found... what is it, like Dungeons in the Dining Room?
Dragons in the Dining Room.
Dragons in the Dining Room, and I found, I think, maybe Lich or Grouch Couch or somebody else, too, at the same time. And it was specifically yours and DOK's, though, were the ones that I watched from beginning to end, though. And I watched everybody else's a little. But your run-through was fantastic. Like,
it was a hell of a run.
Yeah, it was.
It was a hell of a limp through, that's for sure.
Well, I mean, that Thaculon it's so unforgiving, and it's...
Oh, yeah.
it's such a great introduction of like how evil DCC can be. Those tournament modules are because you read through those and you're just like, so no one's ever supposed to finish this.
No.
My only downside to it, in retrospect, the only downside to it is I have the DCC book. I bought it for that specifically, and I've read through it. It doesn't do a good job of giving brand new players a good idea of what DCC really is.
Right.
It gives you a very good idea of what tournament modules are.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Regardless of system, tournament modules are meant to be just an hellish experience. Well, and then I feel like I soured my group on DCC a little bit just because of it. So.
See, that's fair because it is supposed to be even more brutal than anything else in DCC, right? Like there's that one room with the statue dude with the telescoping fists where it's like just if you trigger him, you just die. Like
they found that guy. They found him on the second floor. Yeah, he was. Yeah,
exactly. You just flip the body over and hope is all you can do at that point, right? Like the stat hit and hope. But yeah, I get that because I've seen groups that have played like a bad funnel, like maybe not the best written of the Goodman funnels. Not that any are bad, but like just not the really good ones, right? And they'll kind of bounce off it like, oh, I don't really see the point of this. I don't see the fun in this. Why can't I just pick my character? And a lot of times that's either expectation setting not being done in the funnel early on, or expectation setting by the judge not letting people know like we're all going to die a lot, right? But one of the modules by Goodman that does the best job of that is actually an MCC one. And what it does is in the first encounter in the adventure, it has the lowest luck character immediately get nuked. Immediately to tone set. No ifs, ands, or buts. Whoever is lowest luck, this I think it's a mosquito comes down that's supposed to be like a nanite, bites a guy in the neck, right? And your character then shoots 2 hologram projectors out of his eye. And this avatar of like the far future video game kingdom like comes out of his face, and after he gives the adventure setup, the exposition, your character just falls to the ground dead. And what that does is it tells players immediately like, don't get attached, don't expect to survive. This is what this is. And I think more modules need to do that in funnels to make people understand what DCC is.
Yeah, I think if that's what you're expecting going into it, you can approach it and have a good time. Because at that point it comes. At least in what we played, it's more of kind of an achievement. It's like, can I outsmart this dungeon? Can I get past the bad luck that's guaranteed to happen here? Whereas I think in some other games, like our traditional style of game, is more emphasis on the narrative side of things, and so rampant character death kind of tends to work against that a little bit.
I almost think. Go ahead.
I was going to say it's. What happens with DCC, at least the games that I've seen that are actual campaigns, and for the parts that I've seen, is you start with this nasty funnel, which is this big ball of chaos, and when you're done, you end up with 6 characters who you then kind of apply a little backstory to. You apply a little character to them, you build that character up, and next thing you know, by 4 or 5 levels in, it's almost not distinguishable from a D&D campaign at that point, minus some of the rule differences, some of the major rule differences is really the only thing that sets them apart at that point.
No, you're 100% right. And I always think of it almost in video game terms. It's the difference between playing something that's a linear corridor on rails narrative versus something that has emergent narrative gameplay stuff, like a sandbox game, where it's like, oh, these systems interact and create a weird narrative in the game. It's like in Breath of the Wild when weird shit happens because something's on fire and this guy's aggroed. Like it's a matter of curating the narrative versus the narrative kind of finding you. And with DCC, that's definitely the case in the funnel where it's like you don't get to make the background for those characters up. They find their background because it's like he's a gong farmer that took on this weird chaos guy and pushed him over a pit. And now he has a story, right? That's actually his background. You find it, right?
He might actually have a name now. Like he may not even given him a name before at this point.
He went from guy with 1 HP I was certain would be the one who died to the only sole survivor. How the hell did that happen, right?
I gave him the initial J. He's now Jeremy.
Jeremy Ferrami. I don't know. I didn't know what to name him. He survived. What do I do?
His brother Josh had much going for him in life before he bit it in that room.
So with these games, like for us, obviously our stint was just until we died. How long are your games usually?
So so that's the thing is because so in terms of collecting DCC, like I said, I'd been buying books for a while before I could play, right? I own everything that has ever been published for DCC by Goodman Games.
That's amazing.
I'll real quick potentially mess this up. but that is all DCC in that middle.
Whew.
Goodness.
That is a hell of a collection.
So that's a first party for the top shelf and then third party for the bottom two. And I love it. I love DCC to death. And but I hadn't had a chance to play it. That's the thing. And so I started playing with Chuck. And so the longest thing I've done so far is actually the stream that we play on Goodman Games' channel, which is a hex crawl. And it's more sandboxy than I think most people play DCC. Because usually with DCC, it's like, oh, there's all these really good pre-written adventures. We're just going to go through all those, right?
Right.
And whereas this is kind of not exactly that. And it's been fun because I always want to play longer-term DCC stuff. But most people just like play a funnel and 1 or 2 adventures after that, right? And so it is good to finally have an excuse to play a longer form thing in it.
And if there's one thing we know about Chuck from Defenders of Cobalt, is he's not good at staying on script.
No.
So even if he was trying to run a module, he's no good at staying on script. I mean, we saw that with Blackheart of Thaculon. He just started just murdering people, like in ways that was not intended to be done in that module necessarily. So, that's just Chuck for you.
I love that in his run, canonically, the sun was destroyed.
Yeah, he destroyed he destroyed everything.
So you want to talk about killing things that shouldn't be killed? He killed every living being on that plane.
It's just a pure victory, that's all.
I told DM Thaco after it was over, I was like, listen, I don't care what the score says, Chuck won. Give him that. I don't care what the score says. Give him the crown. It's all over.
Well, see, the players didn't win. Maybe he won as a judge with the highest body count. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, I was going to say, he gets the crown after that one. I was like, no other way around it.
Oh, I loved that. I loved that moment in his run through of it where the sun just gets blotted out and destroyed. I was like, okay, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Okay, I'm here for it. All right.
Oh my god, I felt so bad for those guys. It was just from beginning to end. I was like, was it this bad for us? Like, I think it was. I remember feeling like it was, but I don't think it was.
I remember Dan playing the rogue, the thief, like dying like 15 times during the run.
Now, you have recently collaborated with them doing the art for their Zine. Dan dies at the end, which is system agnostic, but I think heavily leans towards a little DCC bent in there.
For sure.
Was there a lot of inspiration from this thing taken from that run when Dan died like 20 times at Thaculon?
100%, but it's also just the aura of Dan-ness that surrounds Dan at all times.
Oh boy!
So like the DCC, the Thaculon thing was some peak Dan, but that Dan energy is always there, and so like his ability to roll low is only rivaled by the one time I've seen him play as a judge, rolling ridiculously high the entire time.
Oh,
so Dan has this weird yin-yang energy where he's constantly getting murdered as a player. But when I played under him as a judge, we couldn't do anything. Like a goblin could slay the entire party. Like
so basically he's always pro-judge, is basically what you're saying. So even as a player, he's throwing it for the judge's, enjoyment.
That's actually a good point. See, I always thought of it as like an equal and opposite thing, but it's actually just overlapping on a Venn diagram for the judge's favor.
That's right. Huh? See, in our group, our DM, Levi, he has incredibly bad luck with dice. And you would think that would translate, into like what's going on here, a yin-yang kind of situation, where as a player he'd roll really well. It doesn't.
No, he botches all the time. That's what we call him botch.
Yeah. His luck is countered only by another player in our group, who I believe has stolen his luck in some kind of necromantic ritual of some sort. And that's Crazy Ike down here in the chat.
No, you don't. That's not the kind of luck you want to steal, though, if it's the bad luck. So one thing that happened that's interesting is in the Lollygaggers Whitehander games we've been playing, we've all been rolling 80 plus for like 3 sessions in a row. Like each of us gets like one,
which is bad.
Roll. Which is real
bad. People have been watching Whitehander because I've been running it here. So I hope most of our viewing audience realizes that you roll under in that game. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, so it sounds like our game. Yeah.
well, we had 3 nat 100s within about 10 rolls in our last Whitehander session.
Yikes.
And they were all for ranged shots. And so at one point, the player doing that, Jen, she was just like, I'm just not firing a gun anymore. I'm done. I'm going to just sit down. I'm going to slump against the wall of this tavern. I'm done. And it's like, I can't blame you. Like, that was intense.
Man, that game could be pretty punishing. Like, we're playing this Sunday, and like every game session in the last, I think the 3 game sessions prior to this, it's just been catastrophically bad rolls at all times, except for once. One roll, I had like a 7% chance to make it,
if he did.
Clutch.
I had one of those rolls about 2 sessions ago myself too, where it was like, I believe somebody was like, "Do you really want to spend a point to re-roll that? You got like a 7 or 8% chance," and I rolled a 2, and I was like, "Yeah, I wanted to do it. See, I knew it was going to happen. Shut up. I was sure."
Yeah, it's some good stuff.
The price of spending those points is always about whether your GM's willing to really murder you with it, because you give Chuck that point and it's a death sentence for someone. I'm maybe not quite as hardcore as Chuck is when it comes to those points, but he'll spend 5 misfortune on just exploding damage if he can. Like, he'll take you out. He doesn't care.
We did the Flames of Freedom playtest when that was still getting playtested, and our session, the only way we could get out of it alive was for some player characters to sacrifice themselves in the end with Chuck. That was the only way for the playtest adventure. It was like, well, I'm just gonna go in there, I'm gonna set the place on fire, and I'm just gonna hold the monster down. I'm just gonna do it. And I think that was Jeff from Lollygaggers that sacrificed himself. Yeah, it was just like this is just what has to happen. You guys get out. We are not surviving otherwise. It's like I was listening to a Let's Play of Mothership, where like everyone decided that the alien that was on board this ship was just too dangerous, and they all just needed to scuttle the ship, and so everybody just like held hands together, and that was the end of the session. It was just like we're blowing the ship up together. Like, those moments are fun, like
they can be for sure. Yeah, it doesn't happen super often in like your traditional D&D, just because of the way that the game plays, but every once in a while you'll have a heroic action in there, or cataclysmic doom that isn't just like bad rolls. Those are nice. Yeah, I do like systems that have a little bit less focus on like you being a big damn hero for the most part, which is maybe why I gravitate towards DCC too. Sure.
And more like BX OSRE stuff too as well, like Old School Essentials. I love Old School Essentials just because it just takes Moldvay and like makes it palatable for people that aren't our age, and yeah, so like I love that stuff. Just give me a character that's followable. It's more interesting to me narratively. Like, I like stakes. I like 5e just fine. It's just I don't want to be invincible all the time, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, let's call it what it is. If there's one classic problem I've always had with the way that D&D is set up, and this is not limited to 5e. This goes back to maybe even 2nd ed, as far back as I can remember, is that the game has this natural progression of what you fight, and you always end at the end of the day against like either like giants, some sort of elementals, dragons, or outsiders. Like, all roads lead to a hell, abyss, a dragon, or something, because those are the only things high enough challenge rating to challenge you at the end of the game. So like, you hit a point where like you can only take down so many dragons and so many giants before you're just like, okay, I want to do something more interesting than plow my way through these things all the time. So for me, that's where some of these other games that don't have that natural ramp up give you a lot more fluid options to tell stories in, and that's why I gravitate towards those styles of games as well.
Yeah, what's the there's a DCC adventure called something like I think it's like Carnival in the Court of Chaos, whatever. The end of it is in the Court of Chaos for sure. The title of the adventure, and it has your like level 3 or 4 adventurers, because that's what it's made for, going to the plane of chaos and like fighting chaos gods, like at level 3 or 4, and it sets expectations again like really early of like anything can happen in this in this gonzo ass game, and I like that too, because again, like you, I'm used to, okay, all right, so the natural progression, like maybe there's like a beholder coming soon, like that's about the next thing in terms of our challenge level, our challenge rating that we could fight, and you just kind of get used to the cadence of it. Whereas in something like DCC, it's like, no, we make the most random esoteric creatures humanly possible, and if it sounds like something else, the adventure probably failed, right? Like, they want to make it unknowable,
Yeah.
Well, it feels like the roots are different. Like, it definitely feels more sword and sorcery, more Conan inspired, and I think those sorts of stories just had weird factor. It's just like, what the hell is that thing? I don't know. Is it part of mythology?
Well, the thing I always think of is like, it's something that's interesting to me, is sometimes you'll get something that's popular, right? And the first generation makes it, and they have their original inspirations for it all, right? But then a second generation comes in, and they're inspired by the actual thing that was made, not the original inspirations.
True.
And so then it becomes this insular thing, right? And you see it in the art direction. You see it like it happens with films all the time too. It's kind of the problem with Star Wars. Is Star Wars was Akira Kurosawa and spaghetti westerns and pulp serials of the 30s, and then it became inspired by Star Wars, right? And that's kind of where it loses it. Whereas you get something like Mando that's like, no, we actually are going back to the spaghetti westerns, and that's why it works, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and with D&D, I think that's what's happened. Is DCC is still inspired by the Appendix N materials that inspired, Gygax and the original dudes who made D&D, whereas D&D now is like, it's a brand that's inspired by itself. It has its own internal logic, and it has to, and it's being made by fans of it,
Right.
And that's hard. Like it becomes almost incestual at some point. Like you can only spin out that thing so far before you're just out of material,
Yeah,
well, and it has a tendency with the fans making a lot of the third party material now is they take the parts they know, and then they'll reach out and grab one extra inspiration. So it's just one tiny tad bit of flavor that they bring back in and toss in there. Like, this is D&D plus cool zombie rules because we like Walking Dead. Here's D&D 5e material plus this thing because we like Drow. Like it's just got like this little dash of flavor on top of the standard rule sets now.
I think some of it too with these. Sorry about that, but some of these things like Star Wars and all that is because there's such a defined quality to it. Like what it's supposed to be. I think it's really hard for people who are writing that to go outside of those walls. Because you're going to lose your audience. That's kind of baked into the cake already. So like with Star Wars, I think it was its own enemy was itself. And I think to some degree,
I've seen that professionally too. So I was the first artist on the MST3K reboot for Netflix. For I think about close to 2 years, it was just like Joel, me, and a couple lawyers while he was getting the name back. Basically, it was my understanding at the time, and I got to do like a lot of the early visual design and world building on that with him for a long time. And the thing I had in mind through all of that is we're doing this for a new generation. We want it to feel different enough because the old stuff exists, right? Like it's out there for the people that want it. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So we don't need to do exactly that, right? But what we also don't want to do is like prequelize this to where it's unknowable, unrecognizable. It's gone too far, and it loses the charm of the original, right? Yeah. And that is a fine line as a creator. So I feel for the people that are working at Wizards trying to make this stuff feel fresh and vibrant while still staying true to the original spirit of this thing that people already intimately know. And that's the thing is because you got people that really care about this stuff. So if you get it wrong, you're going to be pilloried, and so it's not easy. Like I don't mean to make light of it. I know it's hard, but at the same time, I still am disappointed when it doesn't work, which I think is fair too, right? Like I can understand that it's difficult, but still be disappointed if I don't like it. I think.
Well, because we're those people who care.
Yeah.
Like we talk about those people like they're not us.
Right.
We think about those people like we're not the ones picking up and going, "This isn't Star Wars I remember." Like we're totally those people. Like it's. We're in that boat.
No, we are, and that's the thing, and I think that's why, like over time, I've started to gravitate more towards like, give me like Knave or Maze Rats or Macchiato Monsters or Black Hack or like OSE or just something that like captures that original feel but is different, or even like Luca with Ultraviolet Grasslands that's now going to be its own system, not just a source book, like or Morkborg. Like, give me something that is divorced enough from this thing that I maybe myself hold too precious, so that way I can just have fun and turn my brain off again, right? Because if I'm examining it too closely and I'm seeing the little things where like, oh, I would have done this differently, and I become that grognard jerk, like I'm not having fun either, And so sometimes it's easier to just be like, I'm just going to take a step away and realize I'm being kind of a persnickety asshole about this, and kind of give myself permission to just go.
Now, as a player, what kind of player do you find yourself to be? Like, are you kind of the tactician? Are you like the beer and pretzels guy? Are you the comedian?
I'm a murder hobo that puns a lot. I like puns. I like portmanteaus, and I like putting holes in motherfuckers. That's what I like. So Chuck and I actually are the same wavelength as players. Like a lot of times there'll be like elaborate puzzles being doled out that he and I are supposed to pay attention to, and it's like I'll kind of like look at Chuck in the stream, and he'll look back at me, and then we'll just be like, I run straight at them with my axe. Like I enjoy the emergent chaos of like doing the thing that's maybe not smart, even if it means the character dies, because I don't mind player death. Like, I don't mind my own death, especially. It's a chance to roll up something new. And so I'll do the thing like, no, my guy's a really, really dumb bugbear barbarian in 5e, and he's just gonna run up and attack this thing that he has no business attacking. And once in a while it works out, you know. I was playing in a 5e campaign that I just got slotted into with the DOK guys. There are these big giant statues with these huge like Cloud from Final Fantasy style oversized swords, right? And my bugbear went up and just stabbed one in the dick. That was my goal. Was they're tall. I'm gonna run my bugbear up there and I'm just gonna stab this guy in the dick. That's what I told Joe I wanted to do, and that's what I did. And
Classic.
I crit really great. And because of like polearm mastery, I was able to get a second shot in, and I killed this thing. I just had really great rolls. And I'm like, I count his size large. What are these, Joe? And he's like, large. I'm like, I pick up its sword. And so now my bugbear has this like 3d6 damage sword with all these properties. And so my bugbear in this 5e campaign, poor Joe has to put up with it every week, is like dragging this like 60-foot sword behind him to every.
As a bugbear, you get 10-foot reach too. So you're
that's why I do polearm mastery, is because I'm just an asshole bugbear that's constantly in the way, basically.
Yeah, it's a hell of a reach. That's a good build.
Yeah.
So chaos and incarnate is basically what you are. That's it. So are you an instigator in the terms of like I pull the lever, or is it just the murder hobo size of things?
So I will be the person who pulls the lever if the party is being indecisive, because I want to see the story go forward. And so if we're kind of stalled, and this kind of ties back into something like with us all being streamers, is we are entertainers too. And that can be hard, because if I was sitting at home, I might sit down and plot out all the things that are happening in this puzzle and take 20 minutes to really figure it out. But it's dead air. We're all vamping and trying to get through this. And so at some point, it's like the bugbear just jumps down the chute with the spikes lining the walls and hopes to survive. You know what I mean? Like, at some point, you just have to have something happen. Which can run counter to your instincts as a player, but at the same time, like, somebody laughs in chat because your character died, like, that's actually a win for your stream. And sometimes you have to set your own ego aside and realize that, like, I don't have to be smart right here. I need to do something that's fun, right?
Yeah, I've definitely found that I've had to change my style once we've gone to streaming. Because, like, I was always the guy who was really into puzzles, was into, the tactical play, the, piecing together the plot, coming up with stuff. And I'm notorious for overanalyzing. So I am that guy at a normal table. With our streaming content, though, I've tried to go out of my way to do less of that and, adapt the character to be more funny and more like, participatory with the crowd. And it's interesting.
I found mine's I pretty much have played like I always have, but I think I was already built for this style of play already. Like,
could be.
I think I was mostly already into this. Like, I was never as much a tactician, and I was never as much a combat junkie. So like the other stuff is what I was focused on to begin with. So for me, it hasn't been near as much a transition, I don't think. And I think my GM style works really, really well for what I do with streaming. Like I'm not tied to a lot of maps, and I'm not tied to a lot of that stuff that takes up too much of my time. So I think I do a pretty good job just with the free flow storytelling.
So that was the thing, is like I said, I got started late, right? And the earliest games I could get into weren't even 5e. They were all powered by the Apocalypse stuff and things like Fiasco, right? Because I had a group, like you might see the Paranoia box right there that my thumb is pointing at. So like I was able to get into some of those sorts of games earlier than anything else. And so I too kind of have that like theater of the mind, emergent narrative, like collaborative storytelling, let's just see where it goes kind of sensibility, to where sometimes for me, like over prepping is kind of, you're kind of squeezing the life and spontaneity out of something sometimes. Like, give me the bones of a thing and let me kind of figure it out with the players. I'm usually okay with that, as long as I have like a decent bestiary to draw on, But so I'm with you there. Like, the streaming stuff, I enjoy it. Like, it's how I like to play, and so it hasn't been too much of a change, but yeah.
But it is different though. I mean, because there is a conscious effort that gets made, at least by me or some other people I know, to try to make it enjoyable for the audience, like to maybe do something dumb, maybe, take a, suggestion from chat that you would certainly have never come up with on your own, or even in the sense of like our Wednesday night game that we're doing now, where the chat can interact with bits and that kind of stuff, that sort of give and take, really changes the way you respond to the game, or at least for me. Like I find myself gaming almost this interaction between the audience and myself.
Oh, 100%. And right now with DOK, like Chuck's done a good job of like fostering some relationships with some publishers and things just through luck and happenstance, and also some hard work, like all of it, right? Like sometimes that's just how things work, is they congeal in a weird way, you know? And so like I've gotten to play a bunch of systems I've never played before. Some of those different streams have different ways of interacting with bits. So I've seen some different ways that Twitch accounts are leveraging bits or donations to interact with games, right? And I think that stuff's incredibly smart. I will say, I think one of the communities that does that super well is the Grouch Couch that we were talking about a little earlier. They are so smart with that stuff, man. Like they get that 100%.
Turk's got that shit down. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah, 100%. I do it. Like I think I have 50 gift subs on their stream because
you're up there.
Yeah, because like they make it fun. They make me want to be that guy, you know. And credit to them, like they've got it figured out. They do. And it makes me wonder how I would do that, or how people like us could leverage it, like either on DOK generally or y'all here, you know. Like what does that look like? How
I mean, I know for us, we had a sit down talk amongst us, and we decided that Everstorm was our baby, and that, you know, fans come watch if they want to, but it was not going to have any chat interaction. But we realized other games like my Zweihander game, you know, the Fortune Misfortune is perfect for something like that. You know, we knew with All Flesh Must Be Eaten that Levi wanted to put something out there for fans to be able to interact with, because we knew we weren't doing with our 5e game. And really, I mean, like I said, always kudos to Turk and the Grouch Couch. He's going to be on the show in a few weeks. We're going to talk about this more with him. But but you know, they from the get go knew that's what they were doing, and they built their whole thing around that model. Whereas for a lot of us, it's kind of trying to figure out how to adapt some of that model into what we do. So it doesn't fit as well into some of what we do as because they were just born out of that.
Yeah, you almost have to front load it, right? You almost have to go in knowing that this is our goal is to make this thing that is this interactive narrative with chat, right? It's almost like the Twitch plays Pokemon of tabletop, right? And you know, and that's great. Like I love their show. When I'm not playing on a game on Sundays, I'm in there and checking it out because I find that emergent stuff really fun. And like you said, it might be that thing where one game that y'all run or we run is geared that way, right? Like you just go in knowing from the start, this is going to be the stream where we get turbo fucked with by everybody in chat at a low price just to encourage people to participate and become audience members that come back, right?
Jim does exactly on it. If there's a downside to it, it's that you could spend about 20-25 minutes and no actual role play happen because you're just derailed by chat for forever. But they love it. They're there for that. It doesn't matter to them that happens at all. Like some players might not enjoy that, but it's totally what they're about. And as a viewer, you have to be about it too, because you're going to be right along that ride. So
I think it depends on what you're.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I think he made a good point. Is that as a viewer, you have to be into that too. And what that ends up doing, though, is both codifying and stratifying what those viewers look like and keeping the people that are loyal fans of that thing, right?
Sure.
And so it's self-reinforcing almost, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's why their community, I think, is so strong, is because you either bounce off it immediately or you're fucking in.
Yeah,
and people that stay are super in, which is hard to do. And so I think they just get a lot fucking right, honestly. And I think there's something to be learned from it. And that's not to say that every campaign should be that way, but certainly some of them can be, right? And it's its own thing.
Yeah, it depends on what your goals are, I think. Because, like what we were saying before, when we started this channel, it wasn't necessarily intended to be a big interaction channel. Like, we originally were just like, we play a game, maybe somebody would want to watch it. Right. And so for a lot of the guys in our group, the idea was, play the game just the way we always do. Don't let anything change it. This is what we like. This is what we're doing.
Sure.
And that's really good for preserving, the game that you like. I don't know that it's necessarily great for, the platform, right? Because stuff like Grouch Couch, obviously they're coming in like you described, and setting off with that as an intention, you can build everything around it. So the design of your game, the way your players interact with it, your expectations of what that night is different. So for them, I think it's just show up, laugh a lot, get messed with the chat, poke back at the chat, give and take and that kind of stuff. Whereas I don't know if that's necessarily the case for a lot of other streams that we see. Some of the
I know when we started, it was 15, 20 streams out there running Tomb of Annihilation or running Curse of Strahd. Like, it was an overpopulation. I think Curse of Strahd must have just come out. Right. And it was like everyone was running Curse of Strahd, and a few people were still in the last half of Tomb of Annihilation when we first started streaming. So like we're getting in there, right? We're like, hey, you know what? Like we're a homebrew game. Like if people are going to tune to us, it's because it's not Curse of Strahd, it's not Tomb of Annihilation. So we're
sick of seeing that on every other channel.
Exactly. Oh, hey, and there's Kirk, by the way. It's like
hey, Kirk, we were just talking about you, man. We were just saying that you guys get a lot right when it comes to chat interaction and leveraging.
So, I think as gamers and streamers, you know, like I think that you're right. Like you are part entertainer. Like at the end of the day, you are. And like I see in our group, our guys push to like do more voices. People who normally don't do voice start doing voices. People who start thinking of their characters in role-playing aspects that maybe I didn't always see at a table when we were doing things in person. Like I've seen that growth even in our own people. So it's, and I think some of that interaction with these other groups like Grouch Couch and the Lich Hour and Defender of the Kobold, Jowsum's Den, you know, all those people that we've interacted with. I think we've taken in some of the things they've done well and tried to apply it. So do you find that there's other things you've taken in from other streams that you're now starting to try to do that?
100%. So the voice thing specifically, like I actually used to do it more at my local games when I was first starting with the Powered by the Apocalypse stuff, because that stuff is so character centric and narrative. But once I started to play like, you know, 5e, Pathfinder, DCC, like systems that were a little bit more standard, you know, in terms of how the narrative unfolds, I kind of just became a player that was playing at the table, right? Gotcha. And once I started to stream, though, I started to kind of merge that earlier sensibility of like the flair for the dramatic and that acting and improv and kind of that collaborative storytelling and the yes-anding that occurs, you know. Back into things, and so now I'm doing voices and things, and it's a lot of fun. Like it's just that's what I found is that like every time I push myself to maybe be a little bit more extra, I was having more fun myself, and if I'm having more fun, that means people watching are probably having more fun. And so I think that just ends up being a better thing for everybody.
Do you think that's a personality type? Do you think it's a personality type of yours? Like that you like to be the entertainer and the maybe a center of attention kind of guy?
Oh, 100%. I've always said the easiest way to hide at a party is to be the person with the lampshade on your head because it makes a pretty good mask, right?
Fair.
It's the Robin Williams effect. Like you could be the biggest sad boy, but if you're the one making everybody laugh, nobody knows. And so I've always been that asshole, which is why, like I say, like I like being punny and stuff in streams.
Sure.
Is because it's good cover. Like that was my personality type. Like I'll diffuse situations with humor. I've been doing that since I was little, you know? And so, I definitely like took to that side pretty easy. And it helps when you have people like Jen, like Jeff from Lollygaggers, like both of them are just really good at being witty and on the fly and just rolling with things. And so we get into this weird feedback loop where we don't realize it. And for like 15 minutes, we've done nothing but speak in puns and portmanteaus and innuendos, you know, and it's just fun as a player. And I think it's probably fun to watch then, right? Like if I'm having fun, somebody else probably.
Yeah, I think that's generally true. The reason why I bring that up is one of the things we've talked about in the past is that there are different motivations for gaming, right? So like different kind of almost like classes that people have, you know, like we were talking about before, you're kind of an instigator type. I'm kind of more of a tactician kind of type. So like there are these kind of tendencies for people. And I think for the types of players who are into that like instigation, action, you know, just immediate response, I think that's a really strong fit for a platform like Twitch. Whereas I think some of these other styles maybe isn't. You know, like they're totally, you know, good styles. It's just they don't translate the same way.
Sure, like if you're the guy who really loved like 4th Ed and taking 30 minutes per turn, you might not have a great following on Twitch, right? Like and don't get me wrong, like there are actually things I really like about 4th Ed. Like I've been toying with the idea of like how could I cut some things out of 4th Ed and make like an OGL like weird 4th Ed abomination. It's like the one thing that the community hasn't touched is trying to make 4th Ed something. And so there is a part of my brain that thinks in those terms a little bit. But yeah, like if you're that guy, like that could be a little hard to sell somebody on is like 20 minutes a player turn, you know?
Right.
And so certain games are better, you know? I really like the Free League stuff for that reason. The Free League stuff is like super fast and it's easy to understand. And it also has like enough crunch that you can still do interesting things. And that's been new because I'd never played their stuff. Mostly mostly in protest because I desperately want to play Gen Lab Alpha and it's been out of print for a long time, and I also insist on having print versions of everything. And the only way I could get it is at about $120 on eBay. So I'm like, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying Mutant Year Zero. I'm just not doing Free League until that comes back out.
That's bourbon money right there. You can't. That's a whole nother bottle of your bourbon. That's.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. Now I was going to kind of joke about, you were talking about 4E, and like I was telling you earlier, the first run in I had with the Defenders of Cobalt with Chuck was a 4E game where they didn't have their cameras up. It was just the map, and it was just Chuck's disembodied voice, and the players. And you're right, it's 20. It takes a long time for each person's turn to go through. So it was back in the very beginning, the early days. But it was And Chuck's come on here and tried to defend 4E a few times for us. And
it's a good system.
In Chuck's car 3 days ago talking 4th Ed with him. I get it. and like Chuck's thing is like, if the players aren't into it and they don't know their characters and they don't know what can happen, the turns are 20 minutes. I'm like, Chuck, that's everyone though. That's everyone.
No.
You know, and no one else knows, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I do kind of have a soft spot for 4th Ed's Esoterica though. Like I said, I think there's some way to take some of those concepts and like pull them out and make them into something slimmer. I think there might be something there. I don't know. I
mean, we spent an entire episode talking to him about this, but the long and short of it is, I think there are a lot of really good ideas. I think it was just presented really poorly to the general audience, and the blowback on that just smothered any fire that could have been there.
I still to this day don't understand how skill challenges didn't make it out of 4E into further editions. Like that was the big thing for 4E that I remember taking away that I loved the most with skill challenges. So,
it sort of did.
It kind of made it, but not the same.
Yeah, skill challenges and things being bloodied are like the two things that I still carry over in my brain to everything, because something being bloodied is just a nice hint to players that you're not hopeless here, and yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
I'm just checking out the chat here.
Yep. I saw those Betamax in the closet.
Yep.
It's a true story. You can
it's
find
higher
an episode
quality,
with Chuck.
guys.
He was just on here a few weeks ago. We got a fresh episode with Chuck up on YouTube. So
yeah, and so Jen, you full well know that I don't live with Chuck, but I do live with Chuck every day. He's in my life constantly. I can't get rid of him. He might be in my home right now. He's probably behind this chair. I actually know he wouldn't be, because Chuck, if you watch the Defenders and you don't know this, Chuck is a fucking ogre of a human. Chuck is like 70 feet tall. And so the first time I met Chuck, he was helping me move, right? And I had just got, like, I'm stubborn as hell, and I'd like refused, like, everyone's like, oh, we'll help you move. I'm like, cool, I'll call you when I get here. And I'd spent the entire day moving my shit in myself because I'm that dude. And then so finally Jen actually like helps out the fact that I'm doing this all myself, because I was talking to Jen at the time. And then Dan and Chuck show up, and I'm like, what do they feed you in Kansas? Like, both of them are like 6+ feet tall. Chuck's just an ogre of a human. He's like Shrek with a Chuck face. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And like, I'm 5'10". I'm like pretty average, but next to them, I feel like this tiny fingerling potato of a human.
Yep.
And yeah, man, like don't fuck with Chuck. Chuck does not fit behind this chair. He is not here right now. You would know.
Anyone who watched him open his Y-hander book with a 2-hands Y-hander will, that's, if you didn't see the clip of that, I mean, that's pure Chuck
I'll have
right
to
there.
find that. I'll have to find that.
Daniel D. Fox gave him his Y-hander so he could open up his Y-hander book with it in his front yard. So it's out there.
Good
That's
grief.
fantastic.
So
yeah, I haven't seen that. I could see Chuck holding his Y-hander book, like even the like $500 special edition, and it just looking like a chapbook in his hand. Actually, just this small dinky pocket, like a chick tract of an RPG in his hand. Dude's fucking ginormous.
Definitely would not have guessed that, man.
Yeah,
surprising.
He looked like a normal human on stream, and then in person, I was like, "Well, I apparently did not eat enough protein as a child. Like, I don't know what happened here."
So you've been working with them obviously on the design, and you've got to do. If we haven't really talked too much about it, but you're an artist. That's one of the things that's helped get you into the hobby was your art.
For sure.
Well, I guess maybe the other way around. You got into art through the hobby, kind of both at the same time.
Yeah, it was kind of both.
So, do you feel like your art style naturally lends to that DCC sort of art style? Do you feel like when you look at DCC art, even stuff not done well, you're like, that's the kind of art I would make? Is that what draws you to it?
100%. And that's because like my inspiration for art stuff is basically old 50s horror comics. So like EC that published like the stuff that inspired Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror. and then later on like Creepy and Eerie in the 60s and 70s. Like I love black and white style line art, and that's all that's in OSR. And part of that is because it's what you can afford to produce.
Yeah.
And part of that is because it's nostalgia for the way those books used to look, right?
For the same reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the thing is like, I've been working in like television and video games and other things for years where I was trying to push that old school style and basically always getting pushback on it, right? Like, yeah, but we can do like full color stuff and that's much cooler and kids like it. I'm like, yeah, but I like this. Like, give me a brush and ink. That's what I like. And when I found DCC, I was like, oh, they made this just for me. This RPG is my spirit animal. All the art looks exactly like the art I like to make. And so the first thing I did was like submit stuff to the Gong Farmers Almanac and start to try to get into that community, you know, like because it's exactly the style of work I like. Like if you've ever opened DCC and you're like, this work appeals to me, then hopefully you can see some overlap in my stuff because I love black and white artwork. Like that's my wheelhouse for sure. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that artwork, Leviathan's got a redeemed wisdom check here saying Bernie Wrightson is God.
Yeah.
So there's that. So
I worked with Bernie Wrightson.
Really?
I colored his Starman artwork for his line art. I touched it up and colored it a bit. And in his biography, in his recent most art book, there's one page that my art appears on it, and it says Bernie Wrightson, an unknown artist.
Ooh. You're the unknown artist. Is that like being the third gunman on the grassy knoll or something?
Oh yeah, totally.
Claim to fame that you're the.
Well, let's give the chat some insights into what you got here. So I just linked his page there for you, but I'm also going to show it on the stream, so you don't necessarily have to click there.
Leviathan is our DM, Levi, and he is an artist by trade as well. He's an art teacher and a very capable artist in his own right.
Yeah,
you can check out DM'd art here, where he does art online of our characters if you haven't seen it. So
I have dropped in for that and said hello. It's really cool, and everybody should. It's really cool.
So he's super excited there in the chat that you actually worked with Bernie Wrightson. So
awesome. So horror stuff is definitely my bag. Like my house is all goth spooky boy. Like that's just what I am. Like 24 sad spooky boy time hours in here. Black blinds. You know, I don't want to see sunlight. I burn the moment I step outside. Like, so yeah, horror art's pretty much my jam. And I've been lucky enough. Like I worked with like Sam Raimi's production company a little bit.
Oh, cool.
Like I've worked in horror a bit, and but I tend to have a little bit more humor in my work, which makes it a hard sell a lot of the times. But that makes it perfect for like a gonzo sensibility and something like a DCC adjacent thing, right? Where it can be a little silly and spooky. Because I have a hard time just being straight spooky. I'm just bad at it. Like I'm just not that guy. I can't be dour all the time. Like there has to be humor in it, you know?
Sure. So that's what I was curious of, because I heard you were an artist, but some of your first work was the stuff that appeared in Dan Dies at the End. When I looked at it, I thought, man, he nailed the art that I see in the DCC book when I flipped through it. And I wondered how much it was inspired by DCC. And you're like, I'm going to make some DCC art. Or if this is just your art style and you could just slap it in there and it just looks right the moment you do it.
So that's the thing, is much in the same way that it's like the second generation of people making D&D stuff, DCC and I have the same original inspirations. And that's because I have a bunch of comics from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s on my shelf here. Like, I don't know anything about comics post-Silver Age at all. I just don't. And I'm just an old head when it comes to old styles of work. And that's why when I found DCC, I was like, oh shit, I have to make stuff for the system because it's natural. Like that is my house style, is doing that. And so it was like super fun to just be able to slot in and not lose a step, you know, because that doesn't happen for me a lot. Like not a lot of things are inspired by that old work anymore.
Now, somebody who's an artist of your caliber who has that natural tendency, now you're playing on the Goodman Games channel one day a week. Yeah. Are there people from Goodman knocking on your door like, hey, you do this stuff naturally, like it's coming to you? Like, you think maybe you land a gig with them?
I'm open to it for sure. Like obviously I love their stuff. I own all of it. But I haven't barked up that tree for one, out of like respect for what we're doing with them. I don't want to be that guy, you know?
Sure.
But like definitely would super do it. And then two, the other thing is like, if I ever tried to leverage anything, it would be like, I've got like 20 adventure seeds half written that I would love to just be able to slap like a third party product logo on from them. So if the best thing that I got of it was the ability to just be like, could you take eyeballs on this and approve it? Like that would be amazing for me. Like that's all I need.
Now we know you're not done with design either. Because this is something that's going to come out periodically. I don't remember Chuck said quarterly or whatever, 6 months.
We're kind of figuring it out.
Figuring that part out.
Yeah.
So are we going to maybe see some of your adventure designs in some of those further designs, you think?
Potentially. I wrote a lot of the goblin mutations in the first one. And Jeremy did too, like Chris did from 2 OG games. Like there's a lot of us that did it, but that one in particular was more me than a lot of the other stuff. And I've always had kind of a I would say like 60% art, 40% writing kind of head. I used to edit romance novels freelance on the side, and like story doctor romance novels, because
that's really interesting.
You know what? Well, you know what's all over the fucking Kindle store is romance. It's the number one seller. So if you're freelance editing, you're gonna edit some romance, and so I do write. Like I art first, but I write too.
I could see you as like a Tyler Durden of the freelance editing, where you're just sliding things in the novel that ain't supposed to be there because you're just like.
We need to use the word tumescent and moist in this sentence. We definitely need both of those. Could we get some more alliteration? The turgid tumescence tepidly temps. For sure, man. It's an interesting thing because it's kind of fun to work outside of your natural genre sometime, because it forces you to. Constraints beget creativity. That's what I'll say.
Okay.
If you have a box that you're working in, you have to think in different ways than if you had a completely open playing field where anything could happen, right? And so I do like the challenge of that sometimes. That, and if I'm being honest, like I used to watch The Legends of the Fall on repeat, man. Like I'm a bit of a sap. Like when Brad Pitt dies a good death at the end of the hands of that bear as an old man, I'm like, I love you, Brad Pitt. It's amazing. Sorry, you deserve better than this. So I didn't mind it. Like I actually enjoyed it a lot. I'm a bit of a romantic sap, so it was fine with me.
That's cool. So for those of you who are listening to this and not watching it on later podcast format, I am currently showing all the images. But we also have the link down in the description, so definitely go check it out.
We got a wisdom check redeem question that I was going to ask you, but since it's redeemed, I'll let Levi ask it. Are you doing Inktober?
So I don't usually, but it's usually because I'm just too busy. And so this year I'm not either. But basically every day is Inktober for me, because that's just the art style I draw in. So if you ever look at my stuff, it's like if you like Inktober stuff, that's what I do. I draw brush and ink 99% of the time.
I don't know if it's something about 2020, the COVID, an election year. I feel like on the Twitter, and I'm in the TT2KB Twitter pretty much daily, I feel like I've seen like a 90% reduction in Inktober this year versus what I've seen in the past.
Interesting.
So not to spill too much tea, but the Inktober guy last year copyrighted the term and started to strike books on Amazon that used Inktober in the title after he did.
Really?
Trademark copyrighted it, and he lost a lot of goodwill in the art community. And I don't know enough about it to know if that was warranted. I just know it happened, right?
Wow.
And so what I think happened was he wanted to start making official Inktober merch. And in so doing, his lawyers were like, okay, well, you need to trademark it. You need to own it. And when he did, if you don't aggressively protect your trademark, you can lose it. And so the same lawyers who said you should do this so you could sell official merch then started to aggressively go after anybody that used it. So I think there's been there's been a bit of a mea culpa.
Explains a lot.
Yeah.
That probably explains a lot, because I mean, if there's one thing we could say about artists, you guys put a lot of time into your art, and at the end of the day, you don't want it to be stricken down or as anything else. Like you want to put it out there, you definitely don't want it.
Well, you definitely have like indie artists that made like Inktober sketchbooks, and then they were getting like copyright struck and banned off the Amazon Prime store because 3 of their books got flagged as being illegal. As infringement.
Brutal.
And so when that happened, like I know he lost some goodwill. I don't know if it was ever resolved. Like maybe he's fine. I don't know. But I do remember that happening. So maybe that's why you see some reduction to it.
It's kind of sad though that maybe it wasn't intentional. Like he didn't intend to like do this to other artists. I don't think that. So it's kind of sad that it kind of came out that way. But
yeah, and I think that's what happened is like he came out and said like, oh, I had no idea my lawyers were going to do this, but at that point like the earth was already on fire,
Right.
But you have to know at that point you hired lawyers. Like lawyers are going to lawyer. Like that's what they do. So
yeah, 100%. And that's why that's one of the reasons I just didn't engage with it too. Like especially this year, I was just like, I don't know what's going on with any of this. I don't want to be like a corporate shill or something. Like I have a very staunch anti-capitalist streak in me because of course I enjoy being poor. I make art for a living, and so yeah, I just decided not to engage basically.
It's another set of pictures for another time. But my personal favorite Inktober so far has been Levi's daughter, Leela.
Yeah.
Her versions of Levi's Inktober's have been fantastic. So,
yeah, Facebook's been good for that. Yeah, yeah, this stuff is fascinating. So, like, obviously, you are making a living off this stuff, though. So, like, you were talking beforehand. You were talking about making tools and you know, helping work with other artists. What's that like for you? And what are the sorts of things people can find?
Sure, totally. So early on, I attracted way more peers than fans, right? And I always thought that was a problem. It was like other illustrators liked my work because it was technically proficient, but it was just a little too weird to attract like mainstream audiences. And so for a long time, I was kind of bummed about it. But then I realized that the peers I'd been accumulating were also a base of people that wanted to support me. And so I started to sell like tutorials and brush settings for different applications that let people ink the way I inked and things like that. And those tools ended up comprising the bulk of my income to the point where when something came along like Mystery Science Theater 3000, where it's like, we could be working on this for a year plus before a Kickstarter. We don't know when money is happening, if ever. I could be like, that's okay. I love MST3K. I'm in, you know?
Amen to that.
And so, yeah. And so having that flexibility has been great. And it's also the thing that's allowed me to transition into taking tabletop art more seriously, because on the back end of tabletop stuff, there's not a ton of dough up front, like, and the back end may not ever come. And so you have to be willing to either make not a lot of money or just do it because you want to make cool shit with rad people, which is where I fall, right? Like my money's coming from somewhere else. I don't care if the zine never makes a penny. I just want to make really cool shit with my friends and be able to point to it at the end of the day and be like, we made that, people like it, it's cool, right?
Yeah. Because it seems like in TTRPG art, when a book comes out, you want the book's art to look uniform throughout the whole book. So, and I know, like, when we talked to, he'll be back on the show next week to talk about the new Flames of Freedom, but when he did Zweihander, all the art in Zweihander was done by the same one artist. So, like, do you find that's a thing where it's like, because people have their brand and their art, that it's hard to get into because the art, obviously your art, even though it looks like DCC, fits very well, but you couldn't go do 5e necessarily, and it fit in with what the rest of the art already kind of looks like.
100%. And that's the thing, is like, I've worked as an art director and creative director before, so I get where those folks are coming from that are picking artists. Like, they, as much as they want that work to look like it all came from the same hand, the better. Because that just reinforces the brand that they're trying to support with that artwork, right? Like, as the more house style a 5e bit of art looks like, the better. And so, yeah, I would probably never get picked for that. Like, you might remember 5e briefly started to use Dyson logos for map making and stuff in some of the books. And the Amazon reviews for the books where he made maps, and his maps are beautiful, by the way, were all like, this is terrible, these look simple and bad. And it's because they were more old school, because he's a big figure in like the OSR community. And it's like, no, that works beautiful, y'all. Like, he's an amazing map maker, but because the audience isn't groomed to expect that, they just don't have the taste for it. And so, yeah, somebody like me is not getting in there. I have a better chance at something like DCC, but they have a stable of like 5 to 10 guys that do all their work that they keep employed. Like, they don't need a me, probably. Honestly. You know, like, that's the reality. And that's why, like, usually what I tell illustrators that are coming up is, like, try to make your own stuff. You don't get rich working for other people. Your best bet is to make personal, esoteric stuff that is weird and bespoke and connects with the kind of people that like your shit, and just grow that base over time. And that may mean you have to work a job on the side, and that sucks. I've been there. But until you grow that base, like, you're not going to, like, okay, I did a t-shirt for Van Halen, and I made $500 on it. And I guarantee you, Van Halen made tens of thousands of sales of that t-shirt.
They sold each shirt for $500.
Exactly.
I mean, that's how they make their money. Right. They gave you one t-shirt also, so you technically got $1,000 out of it, right?
Right.
You got the t-shirt and you got the $500, so you're...
Totally. And that's why, as an artist, like, you're better off putting that work into yourself at the end of the day, a lot of the time, right? I'm not saying, like, never take a freelance gig, because that's unrealistic. You have to pay bills. But put equal amounts of effort into building your own brand, your own artwork, your own shit. Like, you have to become the person that's selling stuff directly to other people, or you will never get ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking at what we got on the screen right now is Earthworm Jim. These look really similar to the actual art in the game.
Yeah,
that
was
sure
for
you
an
weren't
art
the original,
show.
right?
That was for an art show in LA. And that was video game themed. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles one is actually official. I did work for Nickelodeon helping design the reboot logo. That's not one they picked, so mine didn't end up getting picked, but I worked on it. Oh, cool. And I've been lucky enough to like get hands on a lot of stuff that I grew up loving. And sometimes you're a little too close to it, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles thing. I hewed too close to the old shit, honestly, and they went a fun new direction. And that kind of goes back to the running theme of tonight, which is when you're too big of a fan of a thing, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees when you're making content for it, right? Like, absolutely, you just can't. Yeah.
So that would be really hard to break away from, because you want that logo to look like that logo. So you just can't break away from it. You want to, you just can't do it though.
It's got a secret of the ooze look on there.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is like I feel like I wasn't being true to my childhood at some point if I strayed too far, and that's why it's better off with somebody that is not my age doing it, right? Like just that's fine. Somebody else could be the next generation of that stuff, and I'm cool with that.
And the person who probably redesigned the design that got picked had probably never watched the original series. They probably just picked it up and said, okay, this is what you get. They're turtles. All right, fine. We'll go with turtles.
Well, in case in point, the most successful thing I ever did for them was I did 2 years of illustration work for SpongeBob, like defining the look and feel of all the merchandise that they license out for like T-shirts and hats and stuff like that for SpongeBob. And I have never watched an episode of SpongeBob in my life.
Oh,
and
you
basically,
lucky man.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm not. Maybe it's the best thing in the world.
I love SpongeBob. Don't get me wrong, but. My 4-year-old loves it more than I do, and Sponge Out of Water, the full-length movie, has been playing in the van for 4 straight months on the way to daycare every day. So it just hits a point where
you reach critical mass.
Yeah, we reach critical mass. So
your saturation point is you are dreaming SpongeBob's voice in your sleep. Yeah.
Tom Kimmy haunts my dreams. It's bad.
No. Yeah. So, but that's the thing is because I wasn't close to it, I was able to do that. You know. And make it interesting and different. And yeah, you're right. Like the person that probably did it was somebody that didn't care who Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird were. You know what I mean? Like,
yep. Yeah, no idea. They just.
Yeah. So on that in particular, did you take a lot of direction from them, or was that still original stuff from you straight out?
So that was the thing is usually when you're working with a character that's on model, like something like a SpongeBob, you have to hew really close to it, right? It's kind of like if you're drawing Mickey Mouse, it better look like fucking Mickey Mouse, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so when they first contacted me, that's what I did. Like I gave them a bunch of SpongeBob drawings that looked exactly like SpongeBob is supposed to look, and they are, to their credit, Nickelodeon is like maybe the one client ever that came back to me and said like, no, make it weirder and make it more you. We hired you because your shit's weird. And so my SpongeBob stuff went places and they loved it. And so my SpongeBob shit's like kind of disturbing and I'm for it. And maybe I was able to do that because I'd never watched the show, right? I didn't know he wasn't supposed to be creepy.
Yeah. Well, some of your stuff has a real Ren and Stimpy vibe to it.
Yeah. I was gonna ask if you were a Ren and Stimpy fan growing up.
Yeah.
I actually have worked on Ren and Stimpy too.
Nice.
I did. Yeah. So I did.
Well, go figure.
He's not only a fan, he's also a client.
Yeah, I did merchandise for them for Nickelodeon too. I did like limited edition artwork and posters, and so I didn't work on the show, but I worked on stuff around the show, supporting the show, and that sensibility is definitely my speed. Like I was a Looney Tunes to Ren and Stimpy kid, not like a Disney to Pixar kid, or you know what I mean? Like like my stuff was always like, okay, I always pick the weird shit. All right, I didn't own a SNES. I owned a Genesis. I didn't own a PSX or a N64. I owned an Atari Jaguar. Like I always picked the wrong thing. Yeah, I always picked the wrong thing. So
are you a hipster? Is that what it is? You just kind of hipster?
I'm just dumb. I'm not doing it to be.
No market research at all.
I wish I had a PlayStation at that time. My Atari Jaguar had like 2 games out for it in 4 years.
Is that the one that had like the 16-button controller? It was like a remote control?
Yes, it was horrible.
Yeah, it was the worst. And I bought it solely to play Doom, which is my favorite video game franchise of all time, but I didn't own a PC at the time. And I was like, Doom's on Atari Jaguar, I'll just get one of those, right? And so I get the Atari Jaguar, and it's got this telephone of a controller with a million buttons, and then I just end up buying a Windows 95 PC like a year later anyway, and I'm like, God damn it.
Most of the people I know who had things like the Genesis and the Jaguar, it's because they already had a really close friend that had the 64 in there, so they could just like, I'll get the other one, and that way for the 2 titles that come out just for this system, we're covered.
Man, that Jaguar, the only time I ever played it was at a convention. They had Alien versus Predator, but you played the Marine. And it was like the first like real immersive like headset goggle thing. I was like, this is crazy. Then I looked at this controller, I'm like, what the fuck is this thing?
Well, no, you're 100% right, is that game was amazing.
Yep.
That game was immersive in a way that other first-person shooters weren't yet. I think it came out before the first Half-Life. And for my money...
it's definitely out before Half-Life.
It did it. Like, it did that immersive storytelling in a way that other games hadn't. And that was the one game that I would use to justify my Atari Jaguar purchase. That and Tempest 2000. It's Tempest 2000, you get a little drunk, you play Tempest 2000, and you almost have a religious experience even as an atheist. It's that amazing. And I had a farm for a while, and on the farm I had goats, and this is pertinent. Wait. It's because Jeff Mintner, the guy that designed Tempest 2000, is like weirdly into goats. Okay. And on LiveJournal, I saw my updates about farm animals, and Jeff Mintner, who made Tempest 2000, ended up becoming a friend of mine for like 3 years on LiveJournal when I was young, and I was like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. He made Tempest 2000. I'm the only person that's ever played Tempest 2000 for more than 3 minutes. I owned a Jaguar.
That's it. We're bringing back LiveJournal. We're bringing back the LiveJournal. That's right.
Exactly. Yeah, Jen's right. We're going back. We have to go back, Kate. We have to go back.
Now, you mentioned something else about a goat earlier before the stream. You said there was a story there. It sounded pretty epic. I have no idea what it's going to be.
Yeah, I didn't want to bury the lead too much, but I do have one goat story on the farm, and I did animal rescue for about 10 years in addition to the art stuff while I was living remotely.
Oh, cool.
And occasionally the shelter in Chicago proper, I was out in the country, would get farm animals in there and they didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah,
and us country bumpkins would get friendly dogs that we couldn't place because there's no fucking homes out there. So what I would do is I would ferry the friendly animals into the shelters in Chicago, and I'd take their feral cats and their farm animals and I'd get them placed in barns after they were spayed and neutered, right? And that was kind of like this cycle that we did. And so in 5 years, I transported over 6,000 Teenard feral cats myself.
Wow.
And I also would end up with weird shit on the farm. And one of those weird things was a pygmy goat. And it was a very tiny little goat. And this goat was not hardy enough for Illinois winters, unfortunately, which meant I had to put an even tinier small goat sweater on him. And the reason this is important is because the only sweater I could put on him was red. And the reason that's important is because my sheep on the farm were fucking terrified of this tiny, black, red-sweatered goat demon that wanted nothing more than to partner with them as mom and dad. And so you've got this tiny goat, Pepe Le Pewing around with a red flag like the charging the bulls at these poor sheep that are terrified for hours on end, right? In the middle of a winter where I'm chasing around in the frigid Illinois air trying to keep this sweater on a goat, which in turn is terrorizing my sheep, which in turn are terrorizing my chickens, which in turn are terrorizing me. And so what happens is this goat will chase the sheep around enough that the sheep eventually exhaust themselves. And the goat finally gets to have like 5 minutes of restful slumber with the things it thinks are its parents. Well, one day I'm coming back from a trip out to like get hay or something, as one does when you're a fucking farmer in the middle of nowhere. And on the way back, I shut my truck off and I step out of the truck and I'm like, what in the fuck is that smell? And it's liquid propane.
Oh, God.
The goat had chased the sheep into the propane tank on my property disconnected the hose, and the air was heavy with propane. And so all it would have taken is one errant spark from my truck to have blown up my farm and maybe every corn cob in about a mile radius. And so that tiny fucking black Philip Peter of a goat almost not only killed me, but every living thing in like a 1 mile radius because of that red fucking sweater.
And if you're from Illinois, the headline would read the next day, probably like meth lab takes farm.
You joke? LaSalle County is the largest poorest county in Illinois, and the majority of like our hoarder cases and shit, you could smell the meth farm in the air, man.
It is. It's how it is in these areas. Yeah. We live in rural Illinois down here. I do anyway. Like I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like, every time a fire goes up anywhere, it's always like, God damn meth labs.
Yeah, what color is that smoke, man?
Yeah, funny story about that. I used to live in the same small town that Dustin lives in. Okay. And back in the day, this is like in the mid-90s, we started internet service providership. And so my job as a young teenager was to go install these things at houses. And I end up at this place, and it's fairly close to where I live, you know, a couple blocks away. I go up the road, I go up there, I drive over, you know, doing my thing, installing on the side. All of a sudden, the cops show up. It's a freaking raid. I get arrested due to being in a meth house installing the internet. I had to explain where I was and what it was, and I had to explain what the internet was to get me out.
That's amazing. One. And two, I wish you had a recording of that.
Oh,
that
God, so do I.
This was all back before people had handheld recording devices on them.
I know, yeah. I know. I get that. Like oh man. I was at a hoarding place once, at a hoarder's house once, and the thing with hoarders, you had to be nice to them to ingratiate yourselves because we weren't animal control. Like they had to allow us on the property to get the animals out, right? Mm-hmm. And so you'd have to be like super nice to these people that are terrible to animals. It was always hard.
Oh, I bet.
So we're super nice to this person. They're terrible the whole time. We get the animals out, whatever. I see them a couple months later, getting taken into or out of a police station. I forget, because it's a small town. Like, you see everything, right?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Rural Illinois. Oh, yeah. And like their boyfriend or somebody is trying to explain, like, that wasn't their drugs and blah, 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 blah. And the cops are like, really? Because they had a whole mess of crack on them. And then the guy that was trying to get the hoarder out of the situation just shut up and like walked away. And I'm like, yeah, with that house, I am not surprised. Like, that house was a nightmare fiesta of problems. Like, the idea that there were a ton of drugs in it, I'm just glad I got the cats out of there, because holy shit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not surprised you were installing something in rural Illinois where there was meth, because meth in rural Illinois is about as common as
they just go hand in hand.
Yeah,
pretty much.
You know, it's these hoarder houses, they definitely make fuel for a game. Like, there's one story that I'm thinking of, and maybe Dustin could tell this one, of the time he had me help him move a piano. You remember that house?
Yeah. So, yes, I had purchased a stand-up piano because my oldest son, Chase, is very musically inclined.
Oh, that's cool.
And we thought maybe he should learn to play a piano. And my wife, she plays piano a little bit. So
gotcha.
She wanted this piano, so I had to get a few of my friends together to move a piano. Now, I had never moved a piano. I had no idea how heavy these motherfuckers are, but they're heavy. Yeah. These things are not joking around. So I'm still working off friend karma for making Jeff and them move a piano for me. Yeah. And well, the funny part of the story is when I moved out of that house, I did not take the piano with me. But the house didn't sell for a long time, and it was sitting up there in Danville, and I was living down here an hour away in Paris, and somebody had broken into the house to squat, apparently. And I come up there to check on the house one time, and they had lifted a few other things out of the house and had stolen some stuff. But the piano was in pieces. It had been moved about 5 feet, and someone got so mad at it that they shattered the thing with sledgehammers or something. It was in pieces all over the floor. It was just scattered, strewn about as far as the eye could see. Like, it was. So I took pictures of it and sent it to the guys just so they could feel better about seeing the piano.
It was the best time I've ever had. Like, I will say, seeing that bastard destroyed brought me so much joy. That
was it like the fax machine scene in Office Space?
It was kind of for them. The only regret was that they can't shake the hand of the person who had smashed it. But it was, the piano is never move a piano.
The reason I bring it up is because where we had to pick it up. So like we had this like little tiny like S10, I think it was, and you borrowed from your uncle, and then we drove it out. It was just Dustin and I. We ended up out middle of nowhere, like Indiana. Like, it was like there's off the road in the boonies, and then this was off of that. Like, it was like out in the middle of nothing. Like, There was some like tall grass. There wasn't even crops out there. It was just like random grassland. And there was this one house just sitting like off of this little like path, like 50 feet into the yard or something. It was just like, just randomly. It looked like it was just completely ran down and everything. We go up and there's these like super sharp, steep steps. There's like 3 steps into this house and a huge gap between like the actual wood and the last concrete step. And you know, we go up there, we open up, and I remember this like old lady is in there. We just hear this voice coming from somewhere in there. Just get in here. I'm like, oh, okay. So like we open up, we have no idea where she's at. There's just like stacks of shit like everywhere. It was just like floor to ceiling, these like columns of like everything brown and dust floating everywhere. It's just crazy in there. And I remember the piano, of course, is like in the back corner, like behind everything. And so we start dragging this thing out. And like I remember we got to the door with it, and it's like exactly the width of the door. So, you know, like there's no place to put your hands. And so we're like just shoving it out. And this is right after I got my massage license for the first time. So like I'm like, please God, let my hands live.
These are my
money makers.
I get that with the art thing. I totally get that. 1,000%. Yeah.
So we're like coming out this door, and I'm like, all right, we just gotta go down these stairs. And this thing is so fucking heavy. Like,
it's so heavy.
I have never moved something this heavy in my life, and it's all like at the top. It's like nowhere else. It's just completely top heavy. It's flipping over.
Yeah, the
everywhere.
worst kind of awkward weight for sure.
Yeah, it was the worst. It was the worst thing we've ever moved, and I felt bad after it was done. Like that was for sure. So.
the worst thing I ever moved. This is a farm story too. That's kind of like the goat one, so I think y'all appreciate it.
Nice.
Is we were dropping the transmission out of a F-250 turbo diesel, so like a Power Stroke. Those things are like 600 pounds.
Yep.
And I had a rooster. His name was Bosser because his name was Big Ol' Stinky Roo. He was like 12 years old. He was too ornery to fucking die, that rooster was. And I loved him to death, but on various occasions, he's done such things as spear me in the ankle 2 inches deep with a spur, tear my eyelid in half, and me having to super glue it on the farm. Like, he was intense, okay? And he hated my ex-brother-in-law, which was fun. And so we are under this truck, right? And we're dropping this trans, and he realizes this is his chance to exact revenge on my brother-in-law, who's his mortal enemy. And so the two of us are trying to drop this trans on ourselves, right? In the driveway with like no jack under this thing. It was the most awkward thing in the world. It was like middle of winter, frozen pack. We're in full body Carhartts. We're frozen. And the rooster runs up underneath, jumps up, and just goes, brrrr, and starts spurring my brother-in-law in the neck.
Oh, God.
And so the jugular.
Right. And so my brother-in-law goes screaming out of there, right? But what happens is now I'm the only one underneath the transmission. And so a 600-pound trans falls on me. And so I'm trapped by a fucking trans. My brother-in-law is bleeding out his neck. And afterwards, all I could do is go up to the rooster and be like, I can't really fault you. That was the perfect opportunity. You really did us in there. I applaud your cunning. Like, I don't know what to tell you, Rooster.
So I'm hoping that this goat and this rooster are in your art somewhere.
That's what I was going to ask. Have these things inspired any of your art? Do you have art of these sorts of things?
100%. Like, I'm glad I had that time on the farm because if nothing else, like, monsters are animals to some degree, right? The more you can root their anatomy and real stuff, the more that you can get away with the fantastical stuff too. So like if their ankles and their chest and their musculature and their hind like feels right, then you could have the craziest fucking tentacle head on them and people are going to believe it's real, right?
Right.
So as long as there's some realism, not a lot, but just some, you're better off. And being able to be around a host of weird animals all the time definitely helped my artwork when it comes to monster design stuff. 100%. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I guess I should start with, do you do any DMing? For DCC it's judging, but do you run games?
So I ran a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse stuff. I ran some 5e. I haven't run DCC yet. And I want to. That's actually the next thing for me is a bunch of seat time in DCC because I do have a lot of monsters in a bestiary pretty planned out. I've got a half dozen or so adventure seeds that are like mostly plotted in terms of like index cards in order. This is what would happen. And so now it's just a matter of like, I want to be able to run and play test these things with confidence. And I know I'll be able to do it. I just haven't done it yet. Yeah, and so that's been one of the nice things about the DOK group, and especially moving here, is I've got this inbuilt group of players who are willing to play test anything now. And so that's probably the next step for me. I just got done with the move coming down here and like getting into the zine stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so probably for me, it's like once life calms down a little bit, I want to start judging a lot more after.
Very cool.
And that's probably the thing that's keeping me from releasing a lot of that self-published stuff so far, is just more seat time.
Mm-hmm. Do you plan on doing it online?
A little bit, yeah. So 2 things I want to do online. I want to start doing some art streams because I think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Jen Tendo, who's been in chat, who is basically like connected at the hip. Like, we're the same human. We finish sentences all the time. Like, we are essentially just on the same wavelength 100%.
She's done a good job of not wandering into frame right now, as you're saying.
Yes, exactly. Well, you might wonder, because a lot of the times our lighting is exactly the same, even when we're on stream, where people are like, are you two in the same house? It's like, no, we just have the same brain. We have a chronic case of same brain is the problem.
She's hiding back there with Chuck, right?
She is actually tall enough to be, so that makes more sense. Jen, you weren't supposed to tell them that. Okay. That's fine. Okay. But yeah, so that's the thing is like, shit, I forgot where I was going actually.
We're talking about if you're going to play online or not.
He derailed himself.
Oh, art streams. So
art stream,
because I'm the person that always picks the wrong thing, I never had a fucking Game Boy. Oh, Siri, I'm not talking to you. So I never had a Game Boy, right? And so I never played any Pokemon shit ever. And Jen knows Pokemon inside and out. So what we're going to do is a stream where she describes Pokemon to me, but without telling me. Yeah, and I have to draw them as monsters based on her descriptions, having never seen them.
Oh, that's genius.
And we're both going to cosplay as trainers. So I'm going to be Ash, and she's going to be the female trainer from Pokemon. And we're going to basically rely on me being stupid and unaware of pop culture to make these hideously deformed Pokemon.
Oh god, that sounds great.
Yeah,
that is amazing.
Did you ever see the art that was the Pokemon as, I guess obviously not because you didn't know what the Pokemon looked like, but there was a period of time where they came out with these like real life Pokemon where it was like high quality, like super detailed, realistic versions of them. Creepy as hell.
Well, so that's kind of what I want to do, but just in more of an OSR tabletop RPG style. And we were talking about ways to like leverage that stuff. And Jen, I'm sorry, I don't know why you're 2 feet tall. That's just the reason you fit behind the chair. So you need to talk to your parents about that, I think. I can't have an effect on that right now. But what I'm thinking is, what we were thinking, actually, I think Jen is the one who brought this up, is we could make like a DCC bestiary of all these fucked up Pokemon.
Well, I'll tell you this much. Based on the art I've seen that you've done, and based on what I know Pokemon look like, you will not make anything near cute enough to be an actual Pokemon.
No,
it's going to be completely. It's going to go completely in the DCC wing by the time you're done. It's going to be exactly what you said, a compendium of
weird shit. Yeah, exactly. And then all we need to do is rely on her Pokemon brain to be like, these are the likely moves that these monsters would have, and then we could just sit down and write it, because she started out in game journalism and is a writer herself, and she's a fantastic. She works in video games and is fantastic with game design and things. So between the two of us, like, we have some irons in the fire. Like, we kind of feel like we could do just about anything, and she's a fantastic partner for that stuff. So it's been a lot of fun over the last 4 months or so, like getting to know her and having that collaborative time with somebody who has such a chronic case of same brain, except for diverging in exactly the ways that are complementary, which is fun. You know, like where we kind of like fit, and it's really good. It's been fun.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. Now, for you guys in the chat who may not have been with us earlier when I showed the art, I'm going to go ahead and put that on the screen, and then we'll keep talking.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'll draw just about anything that has a monster in it. That's just my wheelhouse. Like, you give me a chance to draw a monster, and I'm there. That's what I love. Like, if I could do nothing but draw monsters for the rest of my life, I'd be happy, honestly.
Now, do you run the convention circuit at all when it's active?
So I don't, and that's partly because for a long time when I was on that farm, we were pretty broke. Like, we were subsistence farmers, and I didn't have the money to go to cons. I think I went to like one Wizard World back in the day when it was still the Chicago Comic-Con or whatever it used to be before Wizard World. Like, that's literally the only thing I've ever been to. And so, like, maybe in the future I would. I don't know. But it's hard to say. I kind of, one of those things too is because most of my money does come from the tools. Like, I'm just happy to just make rad shit with my friends at this point, and lucky enough to do it. So I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth and try to go down too many weird avenues. I'm just going to do what's been working, make some fun stuff, and cross my fingers that maybe that fun stuff starts making a little bit of dough too.
Now you guys still continue to make new tools and stuff, right? Because I mean, the tools you've made, they only got so much legs, right? I mean, you got to keep innovating and pushing those. So how much time do you got to spend towards creating the next kind of tool? Like that's got to take a certain amount of time, right?
It does. It does take a fair amount of time. But the nice thing is because I'm also making artwork, I'm kind of making the tools for myself as I make the artwork. So it's a self-fulfilling thing where I'm making tools I need to make my stuff. And it's kind of like a symbiotic thing where I just give them to other people. So I'm kind of like making money on the stuff I'd have to do myself anyway.
Nice. You know? Now, where would people find this stuff?
Oh, that's just store.frenden.com, and it's mostly brushes for an app called Clip Studio, which is weird because it's not Photoshop, which is what most people use, or Procreate.
So it's the Jaguar of Photoshop? Yeah.
It is. Yeah, I picked the weird horse again.
He turned down the Photoshop gig so that he could work on...
I did. I had a chance. I was in the beta for the new brush engine for Adobe, and I was in the private forums back in the day, and I was the fucking irascible dickhead. I was the grognard who was like, your brush engine sucks. It doesn't mix colors well. What the fuck are you? And then, weird. I'm just not in that anymore. I don't know how that happened. And so I use Clip Studio. If you use that, like, I think they're really good brushes, and I think that app's really good too if you make comic style work. Because that's what it's designed for, is like inking, and it's really good at the ink style work, which is what I do. So that's why I use it.
Yeah, it looks cool.
And there's a fair number of other artists out there who do use your stuff. I mean, for this.
Oh yeah, like so weirdly, because I was accumulating peers for so long, like Dave Gibbons uses them, Jamie McKelvey, Brubaker, Sean Phillips, who works at Brubaker, used my stuff. Like a lot of the comics industry does, and so that's why I'm able to make a living off it, is because I did get lucky and kind of find this weird pocket where I was making the tools that comics pros were using. And it's been good because I don't know how to market things because I'm terrible at capitalism. Like I just don't care about it. And so luckily these other people do it for me because I would make no money if it was up to me. I've never bought a Google ad. I don't know how to do any of that shit. Like I'm glad that
it's peers telling other peers, like buy Frenden and stuff. And that's how it's just going through the art world, because one artist uses it and then looks at the other and says, oh yeah, this is the tool I used. Maybe never even associating your name with it, but just here's the tool I use and here's where you go get it.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of like Les Paul being known for guitars rather than for being a musician himself, or you know what I mean? Like,
sure, yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so it's one of those things where I almost don't care if people know my work anymore, because like I make it for myself and it's fun for me, and I make monsters and they make me happy, and that's all I want anyway, because I was always bad at selling stuff. And so if all people know me for are for the tools, fine, I don't care. That's cool.
So there's an artist out there working on like a My Little Pony or something, right? And they're going back to find this brush pad, and they're like, what does that guy who made this make? And they look at your art and you're like, oh man,
yeah, 100%.
This stuff has really traveled.
And conversely, like I've seen some weird shit made with my tools, like, oh, that's a dragon fucking a Subaru. Okay. All right. I guess like I'm not kink shaming, like cool. I didn't expect that, but I can tell the brush you used. You did a good job. I mean, it's technically very well done. That dragon looks like he is having a good time with that Subaru. I get it, and so that's fine. Like I don't care. Cool. Like if it inspires you to make something awesome.
And then is there a small bit of disappointment that you hadn't thought about having a dragon fuck a Subaru first?
Well, in fairness, that was a bit autobiographical. Like I do, Moonlight, and no. I have seen some weird shit drawn with the tools, and I'm here for it. Like I want to see the weird shit. Like if you use any of my stuff to make really weird shit, let me know.
I could draw like paper pen. I'm not too bad. When it comes to digital, I'm horrible. I cannot make the jump to digital. I don't know how.
So that's me too, but that's why I ended up making the tools. Is because I was a brush and ink guy for the longest time, like a Sable brush and ink, like that old school comic style inking. And whenever I'd fire up Photoshop or something, I'm like, this feels like shit. Like this isn't like drawing with paper at all. And so I spent like a decade trying to make digital feel like analog. And that's why my tools sell to comic pros, is because they really feel like you're sitting down and working. So if you ever get Clip Studio, I'll just send you my shit. And maybe you'll like it, because it's way different.
I have to look into that, because I try to use it all the time, and I got a Wacom.
Yeah.
It's not a tablet. This is before those. It was like a mouse pad, like a Wacom with the pin. I could never get it calibrated right. I could never get it to draw like I wanted. And so, but it came with what is this thing called? Like Sketchpad something or other. And that's what I use for like my Zweihander art. When you see all that on Horror Huntenberg, I use it to put all that stuff together. Mostly the imaging and just modeling and working around on it. But I've never gotten it to do what I want it to do. So
that kind of art, like there are two applications I'd recommend. This will get into the weeds, so we don't have to spend too much time on it in case.
No, go for it. There's people here who don't know.
Okay, cool. Well, the two things I would say is Krita, Krita. It's free and open source. And it's really good. It's good art software, and it's free. It's like Blender in that it's just free, like GIMP, And it's made for drawing, though, whereas GIMP is photo editing. Krita is for drawing and concept art and illustration, right?
Sweet.
And so I'll send you a link to that later. And then the other thing is Clip Studio, which is meant specifically for pen and ink style illustration, like for comic books and manga. And so for that Zweihander style, where it's I forget the dude's name, but you're right. The one dude who does all the Zweihander.
Who does all the art. And I think he's back for the new book, too. I think it's all him again.
He totally is. And that style stuff is the kind of stuff you can make in Clip Studio. So I would recommend that. It's like a $50 app that you pay once. It's not like Adobe where you pay month by month. So
yeah, that's soul-crushing.
It's cool.
I was just using this one because it came with the pin that I don't even use. Like, I'm using it with the mouse because I could never get the pin to work like I wanted it to.
Right,
so I was hoping just the analog pin in my hand would be enough that I could make the jump, but never able to.
No, that's the thing. I'll send you links to tablet recommendations too, because there are some that are like $60-$70 that'll probably blow the pants off that, and you'll be fine. I'll send you some stuff.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I used to do hardware reviews for a living. I've done just about everything. I used to do hardware reviews for a living, and so there was a point where I had like 20 tablets in a closet, and I used to just give them away to anybody that was starting art. But I'm finally at the point now where I'm giving like my last one away to Spooky on the Grouch Couch is getting my last one.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Spooky's fantastic. She's just a wonderful person.
Great.
If it weren't for the fact that I've been trying to install Win 10 on this thing that I put Linux on like an asshole a year ago and screwed up the MBR on it. And so now I can't even get to the BIOS to put Win 10 restore on it to get it to install. I'm struggling with it for like 2 weeks. I used to be A+ certified. I used to know computers. This fucking install on this Cintiq companion, I am ready to ship this thing into the fucking sun. I'm not kidding you. And so as soon as I fix that, she's getting it, and that would be my last one. Otherwise, I would have just given you one, man. I used to have
the guy with the Jaguar for the entire Jaguar also put Linux on the other tab.
It fits. That goes hand in hand. That makes sense. It's like everybody in my computer science classes was always Linux, and everything is open source. Everything.
Yeah, that's why I know what Krita is too. I have a problem. I use the weird shit. Sorry. So Jen, it was Manjaro. It wasn't an Ubuntu, but I did have an Ubuntu box for the longest time. I'm sorry.
Yep, you gotta have it for some reasons. It comes up.
Yeah, I got out of it because nothing ever fucking worked.
Well, eventually things work, or you can slap them together eventually to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. It'll work enough. It's like Spotify and Linux. It plays a song once in a while.
Yeah, it'll do
it. So, as an artist, I know I always like when I talk to artists, it's always interesting to hear like where do you pull your inspirations from? Where would you going to sit down to do something new? If you want to do a monster, you often don't want to do a monster that everyone immediately recognizes. You want to make your own monster. So where do you pull your inspirations from?
So two things. One, like at this point, I've been doing it long enough that I just kind of just do it. I don't think about my inspiration too much because I did so much of that so early on that it's almost muscle memory at this point. Like the things that I like are just part of my visual language at this point. But two things I do to keep it fresh, though, because my inspiration is like old horror comics and the same Appendix N shit that the DCC people like, right? It's like Frazetta and EP comics and horror comics from the 30s and shit like that, right? So my influences are what they are, and they've existed for a long time. Pulp magazine covers and shit. But what I'll do to keep things fresh so it doesn't look like something that's been done before is a lot of times I'll like close my eyes and I'll take a pen or pencil or whatever, and I'll do a sheet of thumbnails of just random shapes. And then I'll open my eyes and I'll be like, what the fuck does that look like? And I'll kind of go from there. and because I'm not consciously trying to make something, it frees me up from like being predictable, right? Yeah. And so it's kind of a cheat because I'm not thinking too hard, But at the same time, then I have a page of like 20 little sketches that I could be like, okay, that could be like a weird elephant thing. This could be a tentacle that's actually like a weird cylindrical column with a tail, you know?
In a weird way, it's like looking at clouds and deciding to pick something out of a cloud shape. Like you're deciding that cloud's a race car and that one's an elephant, and you're just going with it.
Plumbing that subconscious, you know, just pulling things out.
Yeah, because you know what? Like, I'm not smart enough to be that creative as Random is. Like, Random is always going to be more creative than I am because I'm relying on all those influences, and I can't help but that, right? And so, yeah.
And so then, again, this just feeds right back into your mentality of when you pick up a TRPG you want to play, it's DCC, where you're random rolling stats, you're random rolling everything on your character, some Zweihander in there. So you got those things just fill right into your wheelhouse.
It is. I love unpredictability, and I like emergent narratives that come from you not like ascribing motives to things. Like they ascribe the motives to themselves because you rolled these three things which just make sense together. So now you know what it is. And that kind of goes back to the thing we were talking about constraints begetting creativity, you know, where it's like if you've got this small box to work within, all of a sudden you have to work really hard to make something interesting. And that's more interesting than just being able to do anything, because being able to do anything is like analysis paralysis, right?
Oh, absolutely.
There's nothing worse than a blank sheet of paper with no direction.
Yep, absolutely. So, like,
Levi redeemed a wisdom check question. Says he'll stain a page with coffee and then illustrate the stain.
Yeah,
that
makes sense.
Exactly the kind of mentality, man. Like, exactly, 100%. It frees you, you know. And so, like, similarly, when I'm writing, if I've got block, and I was just talking to Jen about this earlier, is if I've got a block, I will not only give myself permission to do my worst, but I will give myself dictate to write the absolute worst shit I can. Because there's a difference between giving yourself permission to fail and giving yourself the dictate to fail, right? Because when you purposely do bad, after a while your taste kicks in and you can't help but do better stuff because you're writing the worst thing you can. And you're like, this prose is fucking awful, and your taste kicks in, right? And so I'll do that sometimes. Like, I'll be like, I'm feeling a block, I'm gonna draw the worst fucking stick figures I can. And then after a while of drawing those terrible stick figures, I'm like, no, this is trash. Like, this should be this and that should be that. And then you're not blocked anymore, you know?
I love that. That is so good.
Something very similar that happened. My son, he's picked up TTRPGs now, and he's starting to put together some games and some stuff he's wanting to run with his friends. And so I stay out of it because they're brand new into it. So he comes and asks me for advice every now and then. Well, one day he comes up to me, he's like, Dad, hey, check this out. And he holds up this map. And it's a map. It's got all these continents, everything on it. And it is the most detailed map I have seen since some of the stuff I've seen Levi do. And I'm just like, the coastlines were just so intricate and everything else. And I was like, Chase, I was like, this is awesome. I'm like, where did you figure out how to put all this stuff? He goes, well, I just looked at the textures on the textured wall.
Wow.
He literally just copied the splotches of texture from the texture wall and just found some that were the shapes that basically what he wanted and just literally just traced what they look like. He didn't hold it up to it, but just followed those lines from the splatters on the wall. Like, and it made a map. And I was like, that looks like island chains and everything else. I was like, that works. Like, I'd have never thought of that. But like,
so he's doing the right thing. That's actually something they tell concept artists is start with the silhouette. Is like, if it reads in a silhouette like he's looking at, if it reads in a silhouette, it's strong and it'll work. It doesn't matter what you fill it up with. So you could put anything on those continents, but because the shape feels organic and right.
No, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
It was better than any map I've ever drawn in 30 years of trying to make maps for these games. Like, I was like, how come I've never thought of something like that before?
Like, because you're bringing yourself to it. You're bringing intentionality, you know?
Yeah.
And when you bring that, you bring those preconceived notions that make stuff that's familiar to you. And when you divorce yourself of that, like the coffee stain, like closing your eyes and making a doodle, like that's where you get actually random things that end up sparking creativity. And so he's actually like really astute to do that. They actually teach that in like design classes for monsters and things. Is like start with strong silhouettes, little thumbnails of strong silhouettes, and he's getting them from the wall. Some people go outside and they look at leaves or dirt or rocks, you know?
Sure.
And but it's the same thing. It's the same fucking thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's certain patterns, I think, that they're repeating in nature that I think when you see random things, it's already packaged in there. You know, so being able to reproduce it, I think you get something that looks right as opposed to something that is constructed.
That there is truth to that. I mean, look at like crystalline structures that are consistent. Like we expect certain patterns when we look at things, which is one of the reasons why I said rooting your fantastical monsters with bits of anatomy from real things lets you get away with the stuff that breaks that code, right? And it's because you have to have a little bit of something to root it in, or it's just nothing. It's just gobbledygook, right? And that's because we as humans are used to recognizing patterns. We're really good at recognizing patterns, actually, which is why when you look at those maps, you're like, this makes sense. And you know why? It's because it's exactly the viscosity of paint and the gravity of it on the wall and the shape of the sponge that made that faux finish was rooted in fucking physics of something hitting a wall and drying. And so it's real, and there's something to that. There just is.
So, I mean, like I said, it's those sorts of things sometimes blow my mind, because if he hadn't told me, I'd have never guessed. I'd have thought he would have just sat down, had looked at 100 maps online, and either found one that he copied or something else. So it's always cool to see how the art sometimes comes out, whether you're someone who does it professionally like you, or even just someone like my son who's just doing it for the hell of it. Like,
so I'll say this: high school dropout, self-taught, don't know dick about how to do it. Your son is every bit as much of a professional. I honestly believe that anybody that fucking picks up a pen and starts drawing, like, unless you've got a physical reason you can't, in which case I get that. But I think anybody can learn the muscle memory of becoming an artist. It is just seat time. I don't believe in fucking talent. I started drawing seriously in my mid-20s. I had no fucking idea what I'm doing. I'm about 40 years old now, so that'll give you an idea of how long I've been doing it. And it's one of those things where, like, if you want it and you're excited enough about doing it that you keep doing it, you'll get better at it. It is just muscle memory,
Interesting.
I don't believe in that inherent talent shit. I just don't. Like, some people may have more aptitude towards it, but you know what I think that aptitude is? It's prolonged interest that has given them the perception of people thinking they're talented, because they're willing to sit down and do that for so long, right?
That's a really good point.
I always assume that the actual mechanics of it is like a muscle memory, but I've always assumed there's a sort of that third eye in your head of understanding space and relations, and that part I've always assumed was where a lot of that, being able to see it and visualize it before you ever pick up the pen, was a lot of where I always assumed the art talent, if I was going to use the word, comes from.
Yeah, I guess that gets to the question of, is that a skill or is that a talent, right? So, like, is that a learned thing, or is that just a core component of the brain?
I think you both bring up really good points about that, because I think it's a little column A and B. I think it's both nature and nurture with that. I think some people are more inclined to have spatial reasoning than others, in a way that's attuned to becoming quicker with art, let's say, quicker with the practice. But I do think too, like, so I'm actually not one of those people naturally. I wasn't when I first started. I didn't have that spatial reasoning. But because I got started sort of in a print shop, basically, and I was messing around with their equipment, and I got kind of good at it, and they started to have me do pinstriping and lettering for vehicles was some of my first stuff. And it's kind of like tattoos, in that there's a kind of high wire act with that stuff. Like, you want to get the pinstriping right, like the body line of the vehicle, the flow, like, there's a lot you start to learn really quickly, because when you do that stuff wrong, it looks real wrong. And so I didn't naturally have that, because I can look at the early stuff and see that I didn't. It was like a crucible of fire, where, like, this is permanent, it's indelible, I am doing this, and I have to get good at it. Right. So I think you can learn it. I think some people are better at it, but I do genuinely think you can learn it. I do.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So what about actual classes and stuff? Like, do you go and get refreshed on stuff? Do you get involved in that, or is it just purely just on your own seat time?
So it's been for me, I would say 95% seat time. The one thing that I did do is I've got some illustration courses from the 50s and 60s that are called the Famous Artist course, and they used to be sold to people who wanted to be illustrators back in the day. And this was before photography killed off illustration, when, like, every magazine on the planet had illustrations in it, and you could make a living doing it, Sure. And nowadays, like, not so much. You're kind of lucky if you can make art for a living. And so I have this old correspondence course that I got from a Goodwill in rural Illinois, where, like, clearly some illustrator had passed and left all their books behind. And that was actually how I taught myself on the farm, was these old books. And since then, like, I love learning, and so I will look at tutorials and things. I've never taken a class, but it's one of those things. I'm always curious. I always want to get better. And art is one of those professions where the skill ceiling is unlimited. So it's kind of cool because I could work at this until I'm dead and keep getting better. Like, that's kind of awesome, right?
Absolutely. Are there any particular materials or courses or anything that you would suggest to somebody?
Sure. There's one that's really great called Gnomon, Gnomon. So Gnomon, and it's the Gnomon School. And they have a lot of a wide range of varied tutorials, from video games to production design for movies, concept art, viz dev, world building. Like, they do everything. And those are some of the few things that I actually have watched that were not just me picking from old books from the 50s and 60s. And their stuff's really good. Like, if you're first starting out, it's a little expensive, but it's worth it. It really is.
Right on. So, I mean, what were like some basic things that you pulled out of there? Like, is there like a lesson that really stuck out?
Color theory.
Color
theory was a big thing for me because my influences were all old comics. Old comics had limited color, and the color wasn't really like the best part of them, let's say. And so when I started to do more painted stuff, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And so learning color theory was something that I definitely did not just teach myself. That was something that I had to have some outside guidance on. And for me, it was tutorial videos. And the Gnomon stuff was great for that. But they also teach you like 3D sculpting. Like, if you wanted to sculpt your own minis and stuff, like to bring it back to tabletop, like they got videos on 3D sculpting and things like Blender and ZBrush and all that stuff. And I've made a couple models thanks to Gnomon videos, and it's really easy to follow. And there's something for everybody there for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, I've been seeing Dad working on some of that recently. He's making this. You know, he's not doing everything on digital, but he started getting into Blender a little bit. Started playing around with this, so he's turning some of his sculptures into digitized format just to kind of practice on it. So, and
I've been starting to mess with it too. It's pretty crazy, man. It's pretty crazy the level of detail you can get on minis in Blender. Yeah, and fast. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy how quick that is. Like, I mean, because you can watch my dad make his art, and I'll actually link that up here real quick.
Yeah, make sure you get this link up in there too.
If the link's working, there it goes.
There it is.
But he does a lot of sculpting on Twitch nowadays, and you can see the whole project from start to finish, and there's a lot of hours that go into those things. I mean, it is staggering. Like, I've always known it because I've always been in the house with it, but I didn't know it in actual like staring at it sense.
Right, because even living with it, like, you catch it in bits and pieces as a kid growing up, right? And
right.
That's the thing with art too, is like relating to that. And I've actually been in some of his streams, by the way. I have.
Oh, great! Awesome.
Yeah, I've popped in before, and I really like the work. Like, it's super cool. And in part because I was starting to sculpt more myself, and I noticed it being linked in I think it was the Discord, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe it was YouTube.
Yeah, we have it in Discord too.
Is it Discord? Okay, because I think I jumped into 2 streams before, and I'm not sure if I followed. I probably should, but in seeing it though, it was one of those things where it's like, I relate to it because people think when you're making art, like, oh, you love that, it's fun, like you just like kind of like wave a wand and it's done and you made this cool thing, and it's like no, that painting took like 45 hours, like, fuck.
Yeah.
And people,
like I guess I like I said, I'm not much of an artist. I'm decent with pen and paper, but like other than that, like, but I didn't understand the time that it takes to make like full 3D colored art until I started watching Levi do it for DM'd art, and I was like, I never knew what I was asking Levi for.
Yeah,
and then and so he did our characters for our stream because he was doing them for our overlay. So you get those really cool images if you watch every Storm.
I was in one stream where he was doing, one of the characters had like red leather pants, I want to say.
Morgaine.
Like okay, Morgaine. Yeah.
What's crazy is Jeff's dad's taking all those character art and he's making 3D sculptures of all of our characters. So we're getting 3D sculptures of all of our D&D characters done one by one. So we're watching him do it. So like now to see even Levi's like what he did and see Jeff's dad now taking it the next step further to a 3D model, like the time that takes also, like it blows my mind. Like and I've tried to do these things. Like I did some sculpting in high school and stuff, but I was a crap sculptor. But
sure,
to see it done is crazy. Like
it is like, and that's the thing is too, that's like the pipeline for assets and everything. Is like, if it's a 3D model in a game or a movie, there's somebody that's doing the tiny little thumbnail sketch like we talked about, where if it works as a silhouette, it'll work when it's big. And so there's one guy that's in charge of making that tight little thing, and then somebody that makes the concept art where they take that tight little thing and they like put all the detail in it, which is kind of what's happening in the other streams before your dad gets it. And then your dad gets it, and he's the one who actually make a CGI model of it. So you're actually got like a Hollywood-style production pipeline, and you just didn't know it. Like if you get quick enough, maybe it could be a VFX studio or something.
Oh, God.
But
That'd be amazing. Well, and I think that's something that's important to note too, is that like after you sit down and you see how long it takes, and knowing that it's not just magic wand over the top of it, I think that gives you more freedom to be patient with yourself as an amateur. Because like I think that's the thing that kills it for a lot of people. Like for myself, like I grew up with an artist in the house, so like I got used to seeing this beautiful finished, unbelievable piece of art, and then I would start and I'd be like, this looks like crap. I spent like 10 minutes on this. It looks awful. I can't believe I wasted all that time. And I never gave myself the chance to really spend 10 hours, 20 hours, 30 hours, plugging away at the one piece. And I wonder how many people are in that same boat, like they just bounce off.
100%. There are two things. There are two things that stop people from pursuing any creative field, and whether that's writing, art, sculpting, doesn't matter. Even stuff like visual effects, like if you want to be Stan Winston, like any creative field, right? Or world building for tabletop. And it's the biggest one is that it's easier to acquire taste than it is to acquire the talent, right?
Yes.
So your taste could be really fucking good. You know what good artwork looks like. And you sit down and you're like, this isn't good artwork. And you know what? That never changes. Because as you're starting to catch up to that taste, you know what happens? Your taste gets better.
Yeah.
And so what you have to be comfortable with is constantly chasing that curve. And the problem is that curve on the taste side goes up so fast, and that curve on the talent side, just it's the turtle in the race, right? And so it's getting comfortable with those peaks and valleys. And if you don't, then it's going to be hard to progress.
Do you ever find yourself getting close to your taste, where you're like, nope, you've never caught close even to caught up? You just keep moving.
Yeah, it's you have to be comfortable knowing your taste is always going to accrue faster than your talent. You have to. And because like Flaubert said, talent is long practice, right? And you know what's true about that? Long. And you know what's not true about acquiring taste? Long. Because you can look at something and be like, man, the cinematography in that movie is fucking dope. Like that is so good. Like Children of Men. You could be like, the cinematography in this movie is amazing. And somebody who's never held a camera before can recognize that that's good cinematography. So you want to start being a good cinematographer? You have to learn how a camera works before you even get to start to practice on your cinematography. So like talent is so much quicker to acquire. Or I mean, taste is
than talent.
Yeah.
Well, that gives me hope. It makes me want to sit down with a piece of paper again. I gave up on it really early on, and I really shouldn't have, but...
Well, one thing I'm big on too is like when y'all say things like, oh, I gave up too early, or I'm only good with pen and paper, so I don't consider myself an artist. Like that kind of stuff. Like fuck that. If you've ever had a creative thought in your life and you've ever made something, you're making art, man. Like Herzog said, describing the human condition is the only thing that separates us from cows chewing cud in the field, and that is the fucking truth, man. Like if you're creating something and you have an opinion on it and you're trying to say something, you made art. I'm sorry. I don't care how amateur it is. You made art, period.
Well, there it is. I don't know if we can end it on a better note than that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason to go on from there. So.
Yeah, we have hit the end of our time here. So this is the time where we like to do a lot of plugs. So I will once again link your page real quick. If I can talk and type at the same time. There we go. So there is Frenden's link. Make sure you go check that out. You can see the artwork that we've been posting up here. Sure. What else would you like to plug at this point?
I would say like the easiest place if you want to talk to me at all about art stuff, and I love talking shop, so I'll talk to anybody about this stuff, is probably Twitter. And I'm just Frenden there too. So just say hi. I'll talk art all day. And that's what I like to do. So that's all I'll plug. That and DOK. Like Defenders of Kobold, we stream stuff. We're in the Discord. If you want to watch some tabletop streams, we're constantly online. Like I stream practically every night of the week. And that's pretty much the main thing to plug. We publish stuff through DOK. We do streams, and I make art for all that stuff. So if you're interested in art, tabletop, or talking art, just say hi.
And just to reiterate, he was here a couple weeks back with Chuck from Defenders of Kobold. If you want to own a little piece of Frenden's art, for a mere 50 cents, you can go on Drive-Thru RPG and get Dan Dies at the end, and you will get to then enjoy some of Frenden's art, because he is the artist who's on that Zine. So
really fantastic writing, too. They all did such a good job. Like, I'm so glad to have had a hand in that. Like, it was so fun to draw their shit. I'm not going to lie. It was good.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah, there's the link.
Yeah, there it is. There's Chuck coming in there with the link for it. So if you wanna own a little Frenden art, there's a good place to get started right there. So
I'm sorry, callback time. Thanks, Chuck.
From behind the chair, Chuck Chuck gets the link in from behind the chair.
We all know he's 12 feet tall, so
that's right. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work.
just turn him into the bookcase back there. He's holding everything up.
So he's the blind, actually. Yeah.
Oh God, is that his pocket?
He's wearing corduroys.
Well,
you can say that because Chuck's always wearing corduroys. It was a good guess.
Oh God, you're breaking us. All right, so for us, we are busy throughout the week as well. So Monday nights, you find us here, Dustin and I. We do the Wisdom Check every Monday. Who's our guest next week?
Next week, Daniel D. Fox.
That's right.
Will be here. Mm-hmm. We're talking Flames of Freedom. It's the Kickstarter that's out right now for him and the people from Grim Apparel to put this thing together. So he'll be here next week to talk a little more about that.
Fantastic. Tuesdays, that's Cam's day. Typically, he is bouncing around between a couple different ideas. So he does Bardic Knowledge, which is when he makes music for our games, and talks about all the music theory and all that stuff that goes into it. He also does Barbell Knowledge, which brings in his physical trainer side of things, and he has been working with Air Laser on her workouts and showing people what they can do in this COVID era with working out. So, keeping all of us fit as we game. Wednesdays, we do a bi-weekly game now. It's an all flesh must be eaten game that Levi's running called Don't Sleep. This is an off week for that. So this week, maybe Dustin is putting together some Zweihander stuff.
If my coworkers don't lure me to a bar for rum and Diet Coke, so I might be on about 10 p.m. Wednesday, where I will do some more prep for both my on and off stream Zweihander games. We finally did get to have another session of Horn Huttenberg. Time travel occurred. I may have work to do before next session. So
that was a damn good episode.
Wednesday night around 10. If you don't, I'm out drunk somewhere.
Yeah,
it's a win-win for me. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's where I might be. So
I don't know what you're talking about. Out drunk.
Now, if you were missing out on any of our content in the past, like that Zweihander episode, that is the YouTube link that I just put in there. If you are listening to this later, it's in the description. And that will take you to all of our past broadcasts of our 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons game, which we'll be playing this Saturday night. That is the Everstorm that Levi runs. So that's 5e, homebrew, good stuff. We are dealing with some dragons right now. It's pretty awesome.
There's new episodes of that for YouTube dropping like every other day right now because we're trying to get caught up on the content. So hop in there, go back to episode 5 if you must, and start churning through countless hours of Everstorm. It's good stuff.
Oh, yeah. Thursday, we will try to do video games. So you'll catch some of us on here playing who knows what. Maybe Remnant from the Ashes. Maybe Somebody's Die. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll get Baldur's Gate. I don't know. It'll be something. And then Sunday, since I'm jumping around the week, just making it all confusing, Sunday is Zweihander this week, right? Huh?
Well, we got Everstorm on Saturday. It's our back-to-back weeks for Everstorm. So Everstorm will return on Saturday, 10 p.m. I don't think Levi has named the new game session yet, but it'll come sometime this week. And I don't think he's probably still in the chat. I haven't seen him for a while, so we're not going to get a title drop tonight. But stay tuned to our Discord. I'm sure he'll have a title up for that 10 p.m. Saturday. We played last Saturday. We get to play this Saturday because that's just how the schedule worked out.
Yep.
So, and then on Sunday, 5 p.m., it will be Chapter 8 of my Horn Huttenberg Zweihander game. Paradox is the name of the chapter. The crew just traveled back in time, and now they have to not fuck it up.
Or we have to fuck it up. You figure that one out. This is all an elaborate plan of our group. It's we just shit everywhere that we live, and then we just move.
That's the one where Truck is playing like an automaton that now sounds
like because I killed him 2 sessions in a row. Yeah. So now he's which kudos to Chuck. Talk about pushing people out of their boundaries. By the end of last session, he was doing a pretty serviceable Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonation.
It was rock solid, yeah.
It was great. So there's a story behind that, but it was worth it. And at the beginning, it was horrible. At the beginning of the session, it was horrible. But if you watch the episode, by the end, he's actually got it down pretty good. He was doing good.
You know why? If you put in your time.
Talent is long practice. That's why.
Right. we just had to twist his arm to get him to do it a little bit, but then he did fine. So.
Amen to that. So join us on our Discord that I linked in there. Check out that YouTube channel. Also, if you go to the YouTube, make sure you drop a subscribe because we are giving away a 2nd edition Pathfinder book.
12 more.
if you
We're
want
at 188. 12 more subs on YouTube, and we will hand one of those subs a Pathfinder 2 core rulebook.
Yeah. So we'll keep you keep you in suspense until it happens. But once it happens, we'll square it up. So somebody get a cool book. And I think that's all the plugs, except for, once again, I will link my dad's art. Bam! Go join him up. Check his Patreon out. Check out his Twitch. And that brings us to rating time. So,
oh man, I'm slacking.
Brendan, thank you so much. This was a really fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll always talk art and tabletop, man. Those are the two things, you know?
Hell yeah. And I think we'll have some people inspired in the chat, myself, included, to try to get out there and do some things. And, hopefully that'll pay off.
We're going to say hi to our friends over the Grouch Couch. Turks knows some just chatting tonight. I think they're telling ghost stories for Ghoul Couch because it's October. So
nice.
Thank you again, Frenden, for being here. Thank you to all of our viewers. And let's go say hi to Turk before he signs off.